Chapter 1035. 5 minutes later, inside a team survival mode scenario. After listening to the plot introduction, Fong Bujua, Long Aomin, 7 kills, defeating armies, and Tan Lang, the 4 members of Blade Edge, were transported to the same location. So what is going on? Once they stopped, Fong Bujua opened his mouth to ask, "Why do we have to talk about this in the scenario? Can't we talk about it in the meeting room?" "I'm afraid that won't do." Suddenly, a rather familiar voice came from the side to answer Brother Ju. The moment he heard the voice, Fong Bujue's expression shifted. No way. He turned toward the voice and saw Gu Chun, the section chief of the 9 sections, looked exactly the same in the game world as he did in real life. He looked to be in his 30s, with a handsome face and a lazy demeanor. Even his suit and tie were the same as in real life. So bright. After staring at Gu Chun for 2 seconds, Brother Ju suddenly used his arm to cover his eyes and pretended to yell, "I can't take it anymore. Your data is so bright. I can't look at it directly." "Then why don't you gouge out your own eyes first? We'll continue our conversation after that." Gu Chun was immune to this kind of prank, so he was as calm as ever. Fong Bujue immediately stopped his act and said seriously, "I suddenly feel like I've gotten used to this kind of brightness. This is the first time you've seen this kind of data flow, right?" Gu Chun did not comment on Brother Ju's behavior and just asked his own question. "Yes." Brother Ju studied the man as he replied, "By the way, what is this?" "A Super GM account." The answer Gu Chun gave was both unexpected and reasonable. You can customize your appearance and give orders to the system. You can force yourself to enter and exit the scenario. Your level is set at 999. Your life points, stamina points, and sorcery points are all positive. Your item and skill bar are also unlimited. No wonder. Fong Bujue stroked his chin and said, "It was a 5-man dungeon, but a 6th player appeared. By the way, the GM's character data is not stored in the same file as the players. After the GM's character leaves the scenario, there is no login lobby that the GM's character can enter. Therefore, the GM can only appear in the scenario world or the Dream Company's personal game dimension." Gu Chun added. His words answered Brother Ju's initial question. "I see." Brother Ju nodded and then asked, "Then, I wonder what is the purpose of your visit, Section Chief?" "It's nothing important. I'm just here to greet both of you," Gu Chun replied. "It's more convenient for me to say some things." Then, he turned to Brother Ju and used his hand to point at the 4 people from Blade Group. "I know you found out through your investigation that Blade Group is one of the 9 sections. You don't need to test them anymore. I'll be frank, these 4 are the investigators from my department on the internet." Then, Gu Chun turned to look at the 4 people from Blade Group and used his hand to point at Fong Bujue. "This person, on the surface, is a novelist, but in reality, he is an unstable factor that the country has been keeping an eye on." After saying that, without waiting for a reply, he turned his face back to Brother Ju and continued, "For the sake of safety, I have to hide the identity of my subordinates in real life. I hope you will stop there and not investigate further into this." He paused for a moment. "If you don't listen to my advice and insist on doing things your own way, then the final result may be, one day, the 9 sections will kill all 4 of them in order to eliminate any potential threats." Normally, there was no need to say anything more. However, Gu Chun added, "Then, push all the blame of their deaths onto you. Attach a large amount of personal information about you, and inform their families and comrades at the same time." After hearing this, not only Fong Bujue, but even Brother Long and the others looked at Gu Chun with a look that said, "Are you King kidding me?" As for Mr. Fong Bujue, 2 seconds later, Gu Chun looked at his subordinates and continued, "Considering that his danger level in real life is very, very, very high. It's so high that it's beyond the scope of your supervision. You don't have to worry too much about him." He paused for half a second and intentionally glanced at Brother Bujue. A sinister smile appeared on his face. After all, there are already people in charge of monitoring him. If everything goes well, the rest of his life and his descendants won't be able to escape the clutches of the 9 sections. The chief is wise. The chief is wise. The chief's plan is flawless. The chief has great foresight. The four men of Dao Feng all looked at Guchan with respect. Their attitude could be said to be submissive. Although the chief had used the term clutches of the 9 sections to describe the organization he was in charge of, Brother Long and the others didn't find it strange at all, to put it simply. Guchan felt that he had said enough, so he used the usual concluding tone he used during meetings and said loudly, "In the future, both of you should continue to do your own things. If you have the conditions, help each other. If you don't cause trouble for each other." Speaking up to this point, he actually took out a coffee pot that was exactly the same as the one he used in real life. He unscrewed the lid and poured himself a cup of coffee. Phew! After blowing on the coffee and taking a sip, Guchan opened his mouth again and asked, "Do you have any other questions?" "I do." Before Guchan could finish, Feng Bujue roared. As expected, Guchan replied calmly and rolled his eyes. Feng Bujue took a step forward. With his hands on his hips, he raised his head and glared at Feng Yan. "What do you mean by the rest of my life, and my descendants won't be able to escape the clutches of the 9 sections? You better explain yourself." Pajuan, Greedy Wolf, 7 kills, Long Aomin. Hearing this, Guchan called out to the 4 men without turning his head. "Yes, sir." The 4 men replied in unison. "Retreat." Guchan's order was concise. "Yes, sir." The 4 men's reaction was the same, and they were very decisive. Even with the system's punishment, they retreated without hesitation. In an instant, they turned into 4 rays of white light. After they left, Guchan turned to Feng Bujue and said, "Feng Bujue, Ruo Yu has been staying at your place for quite some time now, hasn't she?" "Yes, why?" Feng Bujue replied. "I've already told my brother-in-law and his wife, who are Ruo Yu's grandparents, about this situation." Guchan continued. "Oh, so what?" Feng Bujue continued. "Let me give you a brief introduction. Those 2 men are 2 of the 10 strongest spiritual ability users in the world right now, and both of them have the personality of a naughty child." Guchan replied slowly. Guchan replied unhurriedly. "As for me, I've successfully caused them to have some subtle misunderstandings about your relationship with Ruo Yu. In other words, there are 2 paths that you can take in your future. The first is to become my relative. At that time, we'll be one big family. We'll have a meal together during festivals, and you'll have plenty of benefits if you call me Grandpa. Let's not talk about money and power. I'll even give you a nuclear weapon as a red packet. If you don't like anyone in Asia, just say the word, and I'll make sure that they'll disappear from this planet before the Earth completes its next rotation." As he said that, he took another sip of coffee and continued. "As for the second path, if you really want to choose, that's fine too. However, I don't know what will happen. In any case, it'll be suicide." Chapter 1036, November 14th, 8 a.m. The most anticipated matchup in the history of Thriller Paradise was finally announced. In the nearly 30 hours before the list was released, the intelligence and analysis departments of the major studios had already calculated all the possible matchups. Other than Underworld Frontline and Trash Alliance, the teams behind the other 6 teams had already prepared all 7 battle strategies. They were just waiting for the announcement to be made before handing out a copy to the members. The final matchups were as follows: Regulation versus Brahmin, Warring States versus Mountain River, Trash Alliance versus Jianghu, Underworld Frontline versus Red Sakura. I believe the readers who are reading this chapter will be surprised when they see the matchups, but after the surprise, you might have guessed something. Yes, this is a conspiracy. As the author, I forcefully placed Order and Gods, 2 teams that everyone thought would enter the finals together to create a reading experience similar to what the F***CK. This was the power of God. Alright, this chapter is not the beginning of the month, so please treat the content seriously. We will not talk about the format of the semifinals. There is one thing that needs to be explained first, and that is, Dream Company has changed the time of the semifinals. According to the official website, to allow the audience to see the live stream of each semifinal, the time of the 4 matches will be staggered. In other words, for the 4 matches, there would be a first and a last. The next match would only start after the first one was over. Of course, regarding the player's online time limit, Dream Company had prepared the corresponding solution. They would communicate with the person in charge of the 8 teams, usually the team leader, within 12 hours to confirm and coordinate the player's online time. Then, at midnight on the 15th, Dream Company would remove the online time limit for all the members of the 8 teams until the match ended. This was actually quite difficult to execute. The main problem was the negotiation. If a team under Zombie Blade had entered the top 8, they would have used this opportunity to create a ruckus and try to find a way to gain some benefits. Unfortunately, their 2 teams and even their bosses had all been taken care of by Brother Jew. As for the 6 pro teams that had successfully entered the top 8, although it was not that they did not play any tricks, they would not go as far as Zombie Blade. Therefore, the negotiation went smoothly. Basically, before noon on the 14th, the 6 gaming studios had finished their negotiation with the game company. The remaining teams were Trash Alliance and Underworld Frontline. Uncle Trash appeared to be a very easygoing person. After receiving the online communication from Dream Company and hearing the description, he replied without even thinking, "Do whatever you want." After the call, "Do you want me to give you a good review?" This kind of self-abandonment touched the customer service to the point of tears, or perhaps tears of pity. In any case, the negotiation with Trash Alliance was the smoothest. But Underworld Frontline. Feng Bujue's reaction was quite surprising. Dream Incorporated thought that Brother Jew would say something like, "I am invincible before any rules," or something along those lines. But Brother Jew was different. But to their surprise, after Feng Bujue listened to the arrangement, he made a request. His request was to put Underworld Frontline in the first match. The customer service manager, who was responsible for communicating with Feng Bujue, they did not dare allow their employees to communicate with Brother Jew for fear of being scammed, heard this request. His first reaction was, "Is this some kind of competition strategy?" But he was wrong. Feng Bujue then came up with a valid reason. "None of our members are professional players. A few of them are busy during the day. If we were put into the last 2 matches, and the first few matches take a long time, it might affect their work. This kind of pressure from real life will no doubt affect their performance during the match." Indeed, Underworld Frontline was the only team that was made up of non-professional players. From the perspective of the situation, this request was quite reasonable. Therefore, Dream Company quickly relayed Feng Bujue's request and reason to the managers of the other 6 teams. After they all nodded, they contacted Red Cherry, who was directly related to this matter, and then something dramatic happened. The team leader, Su Huaishang, agreed to this without consulting the upper management of the studio. Even though this move did not have much effect at the time, but it was a foreshadowing of something that would happen later. November 15th, midnight. The semi-finals of tournament for the Best S2 Battle of the 4 Worlds had begun. The first match of the night was between Hell Frontline and Red Cherry. Feng Bujue, level 50, Inch Wang Tanji, level 50, Rain Like Rain, level 50, Laughing Soul, level 50, Flower on the Rock, level 50, please select the game mode that your team wishes to join. You have selected tournament for the Best S2 Battle of the 4 Worlds. Please confirm. Confirmed. Please select the spectator for this match. Confirmed. Your team has entered the queue. We are waiting for your opponent. Matching complete. Coordinating nerve connection. Generating scenario. Downloading. Please wait a moment. The smoke of war has just been settled, and the blood is still fresh. The battle rises again, and the people do not wait. The stars gather in the 4 worlds, and the battle is over the clouds. Download complete. Welcome to tournament for the Best S2 Battle of the 4 Worlds. This mode provides a scenario introduction, and there is a chance of triggering hidden side missions and special world building. Reward for winning the scenario, advance to the finals. The scenario introduction will be played soon. After that, the match will start. This time, Feng Bujue chose to spectate. Xiaoling. Yes, they were not mistaken. In the semi-finals, he made the only marksman in his team sit on the bench. When the audience saw the lineup for Underworld Frontline, they were all stunned. throughout Brother Ju's team's journey to the finals. Gu Xiaoling was the only member who had never been substituted. She could be said to be the main force of the team, but it was such a member who had become a spectator in a match that would decide whether or not they would advance to the finals. Chapter 1037. Waning autumn, withered leaves everywhere. Waning sunset, crimson clouds fill the sky. In this waning scene, a group of people on horseback arrived at the entrance of a valley. At the beginning of the opening cinematic, there was a powerful old voice narrating a few sentences in an ancient tone, which set the tone of the entire script. In the exploration team of about 100 people, there are powerful officials, generals with outstanding military achievements, and even relatives of the royal family. Of course, the largest number of people are still soldiers and servants. As the narrator narrated, a group of people dressed in ancient China clothing and armor came out of a mountain road one after another. The three men leading the group were riding horses, and each of them was wearing a different style of official uniform, which seemed to indicate that they came from different organizations. Judging from the eyes of these three people, their physiques, and the aura that they exuded, they were undoubtedly martial artists, and they were all experts who had been through killing for a long time. Following behind the three vanguards was a large group of soldiers wearing light armor and carrying swords at their waists. At first glance, these people looked like ordinary soldiers, but if one looked closely, it was not difficult to see that they were all martial artists with a certain level of internal energy foundation. They were definitely not ordinary soldiers. Looking further back, one could see other people on horseback, as well as carriages. There were a total of 3 carriages in the group, and they were slowly moving forward under the escort of the soldiers. Each carriage was pulled by 2 horses. Other than a coachman who drove the carriage, there was also a rider who followed closely beside the coachman. With one look, one could tell that this was the role of a personal bodyguard. Finally, at the end of the group, there were 2 riders and more than 10 people in casual clothes. Although these people were not equipped with weapons or armor, they were all strong men. Just by looking at their footsteps, one could tell that they were much lighter than the average person. Ming, 22 years of Sheng Ping. The emperor was infected with a terrible disease. He urgently summoned 3 of his trusted aides to the palace and personally issued a secret edict. After a month, the 3 actual leaders of the governor's office, the embroidered uniform guards, and the Eastern faction guards led a mysterious group of people and appeared in this valley located in the barren land. When the narration reached this point, a caption appeared in the vision of the players and the audience at the same time. The content was as follows. Note: the history of the Ming dynasty in this scenario is very different from the actual history. The basic setting is Ming Guangzong, who should have died of illness in the same year as Zhu Chongluo, lived for another 30 years before dying of illness. The butterfly effect created from that caused a huge change in the Ming dynasty's ruler, government structure, and the duration of the dynasty. The current scenario takes place in a period that does not exist in official history. Sheng Ping is a fictional era, and so is the emperor and other characters. After the subtitles appeared and paused for a while, the narration continued. This valley is called Heart Burial Valley. It is located in a desolate area at the border. The entrance of the valley is extremely difficult to find, and the valley is isolated from the rest of the world. Legend has it that a king of hell lives in Heartgrave Valley. He can control life and death. If those who have nowhere to go in the world can be taken in by the king of hell and enter the valley, they will be able to preserve their lives. No matter who they are, what they have done outside, no matter how powerful their enemies are, once they enter Heartgrave Valley, the king of hell will ensure their survival. However, this person will not be able to leave the valley for the rest of their life, or else they will have to return the life that the king of hell has given them to the king of hell. After this introduction, the camera turned, and the image cut to the deepest part of Heartgrave Valley, behind a mountain pass, by the bank of a clear spring. A rather large village appeared. At the end of the village, there was a mountain villa. The players' eyes followed the camera as they weaved through the village. The king of the desert blade, Diho, the first spear, Feng Air, the flying dragon swordsman. He's Zimming, the head of Octagonal Spire. Mengchi, whenever the narration announced the names of these people, the camera would quickly move to one of the villagers and stay there for a few seconds. Obviously, this was a hint, or perhaps an indication. These villagers who were plowing the fields, fetching water, and feeding the animals were all once famous figures in their respective regions. These masters who once dominated the martial arts world are now ghosts under the king of hell. Their lives don't belong to them anymore. It's because they've done something wrong. Killing the innocent, betraying the country, collaborating with the enemy, raping women, killing for money. Everyone in this village has done things that they shouldn't do as a human, so they no longer have a place in the world. That's why he came here and became a ghost. It's not that no one has tried to hunt down the fugitives in Heartgrave Valley. Many years ago, someone tried, and in recent years, there have been others who have tried, but these people either gave up or became ghosts. Until today, the order of this place will be broken. The plot introduction ended there, and the players gained the ability to move at the same time. This time, the two teams teleported together and stayed at the same place as their teammates. F***CK. What's going on? Wang Tanji asked as soon as he stood still. At that moment, the 4 members of Hell Frontline appeared in the middle of a desert. About 10 meters in front of them, there were more than 10 groups of people scattered around. With a rough estimation, there were about 300 to 400 people. These people were dressed differently and carried different weapons. Based on the distance between the group, they came from at least 10 different camps, and that did not include those who stood alone. Could this be a martial arts convention? That was the first thought that popped into Hua Jin's mind because she quickly noticed the bald monks, Taoist priests, Taoist nuns, salt merchants, and so on. With Miss Anne's many years of experience watching wuxia movies, the people before her were most likely martial artists from various factions. Probably, Feng Bujua said. Speaking of which, I feel like this scene is quite familiar. Actually, at that moment, Brother Zhu had already predicted that the scenario would take place in the world of Sword Duel in Chonglin. There were 2 reasons for that. First, he had heard the name Octagon Spire in the introductory cinematic. This organization was one of the 1 mansion, 2 floors, 3 factions, 4 doors in Chonglin Sword Duel. Secondly, after communicating with Phantom Demon Church, Brother Zhu had found out something. The Bell Demon that he killed at the mountain behind Chonglin Town was actually one of the 9 necromancers under the King of the Abyss. She was similar to Fu Ling on Devil's Maw Island, a former 9 necromancers who had been exiled. This connection also proved that this scenario world existed in the main universe of Thriller Paradise, and all the matches in Battle of the 4 Worlds took place in the main universe. This made Brother Zhu even more certain of his speculation. Several seconds later, Ruo Yu realized the meaning behind Feng Bujua's words, and she turned to say, "This is the scenario world at Chonglin Town, right?" Xiao Tan heard that and asked, "So, that world is also in the main universe?" "That's normal." Feng Bujua shrugged. "Since there is a planet similar to America from the 80s in the main universe, why can't there be a planet similar to China from the 16th century?" You have a point. We've been a planet filled with rabbits who know how to punch. Xiao Tan nodded. Just as they were talking, suddenly, a figure flew into the sky and flew over the crowd's heads. He walked through the air and landed on a tall rock in the desert, standing before the crowd. It was a man in his 50s. He had a valiant face and a dignified appearance. He was tall and straight and had an extraordinary bearing. He wore a green robe with a metal belt around his waist. He held a shirt in his hands and wore boots on his feet. He was not wearing any weapon. Fellow heroes, after the man stopped, he used a condescending gaze to scan the crowd before him and said, "Greetings. I, Yuan Wushuang, greet you." His voice was not loud, and he did not shout, but every word that he said traveled clearly into the ears of everyone within a few hundred meters. Telepathy through internal energy, is it? Feng Bujue scratched his chin and said, "To be able to use it on so many people at the same time in such an open space." That goes to show how powerful he is. Other than that, since he dares to jump up to such a high spot and speak so loudly to the entire martial world, it means that his position in the martial world is not to be underestimated. The next second, the people's reaction explained the identity of Yuan Wushuang. "Greetings, Alliance Master." Similar words were heard from the crowd, both near and far. "Oh, so it's the leader of the martial world." Feng Bujua used a tone that said, "Well, it's just the leader of the martial world. Fellow heroes, there's no need to be so polite." After a few seconds, the leader saluted back and said loudly, "The situation is urgent, and time waits for no one. I'll get straight to the point." He paused for half a second and said, "I've received reliable news that half a month ago, the Imperial Court sent more than 100 masters all the way from Shuntian Prefecture to Buried Heart Valley. They arrived not long ago." As he spoke, he turned around and gestured to Shan Ing, who was far behind him. "After a few inquiries, I found out there's a longevity technique hidden in Buried Heart Valley. It's said that those who master it can live forever and stay young forever." Before he could finish his words, a commotion broke out from the crowd. In fact, it was hard to say whether he wanted to say it or not, because it was basically an open secret. If the group of martial artists standing below did not know about the art of immortality, how could they be so enthusiastic to come to this desolate place? "Heroes," the Alliance Master paused for a moment before continuing, "the art of immortality is a classic created by the people of our martial arts world. How can we hand it over to those lackeys of the Imperial Court?" His tone suddenly became agitated. "I think this is absolutely impossible." "That's right. We can't do that. You're wise, leader. We can't let the longevity technique fall into the hands of those lackeys." Alliance Master Yuan nodded in satisfaction when he heard cheers. "I've invited all of you here today to ask for your help. I have a feeling," hearing this, a smile suddenly appeared on Brother Ju's face, "that he is going to say something very shameless." His prophecy came true at once. As expected, Alliance Master Yuan's next sentence was, "As long as we gather the strength of all the factions, it'll be easy to take down those lackeys of the Imperial Court." He waved his hand and waved his sleeve. "However, I'm sure the Imperial Court won't let this go. They'll definitely send people to steal the technique from Buried Heart Valley. Therefore, I think that the longevity technique should be safeguarded by all of us in the martial arts world." Alliance Master is right. It should be safeguarded by us. The sect leaders of several sects couldn't wait to respond to Alliance Master Yuan's call, shouting loudly, "Hee, I'm speechless at this logic." Hua Jian looked at the NPC in disdain and sneered. "Let's not talk about the Ming Dynasty government in this world. Even if they're a group of robbers, this Alliance Master seems to be saying that our neighbor has a treasure, and to prevent robbers from robbing it, we'll take it and safekeep it for our neighbor. Also, Ruo Yu added coldly, the so-called safekeeping by all of the martial arts world means that he, the Alliance Master, will safekeep it first, right? After the item is in his hands, it's hard to say if he'll take it out again or if what he takes out is real or fake. I think, even if he's really forced to safekeep it with someone else," Brother Ju said. Xiao Tan added, "he will definitely copy down the spell or memorize it first before handing it over." "Humph, you're all too naive." Hearing his teammates' words, Feng Bujua shook his head with a smile. "If it's me, everyone here today, after being used by me, will not be able to walk out of this desert alive." The few of them spoke without thinking, and their voices were quite loud, but no one paid them any attention. This was because, until now, the system protection time after entering the scenario had not passed. Brother Ju and the rest knew this very well. After all, they were level 50 players, and they had plenty of experience in the scenario, so they were familiar with the details of the game. Based on the current situation, the four of them had appeared out of nowhere, and there were so many people standing around them, but none of the NPCs had noticed their presence. This was undoubtedly due to the system's protection. Since none of you have any objections, seeing how things were progressing smoothly, Leader Yuan continued, "Then, let's not waste any time. The sun is setting, and it's the best time to enter the valley. It looked like he had done a thorough investigation. Buried Heart Valley is shrouded in a light fog, so you can see things in the dark. Everyone, follow me now. We'll wipe out those government dogs and find the art of immortality and protect it. As soon as he finished speaking, the various sects were already in an uproar as they rushed forward. In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of people had already followed the person surnamed Yuan and rushed towards the valley a few kilometers away. Wherever they passed, waves of sand and dust were raised. Only Brother Jew and the other three stood where they were. They looked at the motley crowd and tossed them a condescending gaze. Main quest triggered. Killed 4 members of Red Sakura. At the same time, the quest announcement appeared. Chapter 1038. Based on what happened 5 minutes after the start of the game, the opening of the scenario was split into 2 parts. The first part was the introduction, cinematic, and narration. The 2 teams watched this part together, but the second part was different. The 4 from Underworld Frontline were transported to the location of the Jianghu faction, and under the protection of the system, they watched a martial arts competition. Red Cherry, on the other hand, was transported to Buried Heart Valley, and they met Yama. Yama was a title that sent chills down one's spine, because when people mentioned this title, they would associate it with death. Perhaps there were people in this world who were not afraid of death, but for most people, death was scary. Therefore, Yama was scary as well. However, the Yama in Buried Heart Valley was not scary at all. Not only was she not scary, she was mesmerizing. This was because Yama was a woman, a beautiful woman. Her beauty was enough to take one's breath away, making one's soul sway and yearn for her even in their dreams. Furthermore, after so many years, Yama's appearance and body had remained the same as that of an 18 or 19-year-old girl. Time did not seem to have left any trace on her body. Therefore, no one knew how old Yama was. Some said she was 40, some said she was 50, and some said there was more than one Yama, and this woman was Yama's daughter. Of course, the last speculation was obviously impossible. Yama would meet the ghosts in the valley at least once a month, so if she was pregnant, it would be impossible for her to hide it. Therefore, there was the saying of the art of immortality. Even though the 4 players from Red Cherry Blossom had suddenly appeared in front of him, Yama's expression didn't change much. His tone was calm as well. Something rare happened today. At this moment, Yama was lying on a wide jade bed with one hand on her forehead. She was wearing a thin gauze dress, and her exquisite body and fair skin were faintly discernible. Someone actually managed to sneak into my Buried Heart Valley and into my villa without making a sound. At this point, Yama sat up cross-legged and glanced at the 4 players. And 4 ladies. This is... The Blood Rose cupped her hands and thought for a few seconds before she decided what to call him. Senior, we have mistakenly entered this place today, and we have offended you. May I know your name? Blood Rose was Red Cherry's vice-captain. She was also the team's brains. Most of the negotiations with the NPCs were handled by her. Since she was in charge of this work, she definitely understood the basic principles. For example, at any time, especially when one had just entered the scenario, one could be more courteous to those NPCs who did not attack directly or who were not hostile. That way, one might be able to receive a mission, information, or even profit directly. Yama laughed and stood up. You broke into someone else's house and asked them to introduce themselves? Hearing this, Su Huaishang was the first to react. She quickly took half a step forward and bowed. I apologize for my lack of manners. Please forgive me. I am Su. Wait a minute. To her surprise, Yama suddenly interrupted Su Huaishang and slowly walked toward her. In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. Even though the woman did not say it explicitly, all the members of Red Cherry knew that, based on the 2 sentences of my Buried Heart Valley and my villa, this beautiful woman before them was most likely the Yama mentioned in the introduction. Furthermore, when faced with the sudden appearance of 4 armed strangers, she was able to maintain such a calm demeanor. This conclusion was not far from the truth. Dong, dong. Yama walked barefooted across the wooden floor, creating a light sound of footsteps. Her feet were beautiful as well. The delicate curves and smooth skin would make one forget that they were supposed to be the roughest part of the human body. Yama walked to stand before Su Huaishang and stood there quietly. 2 seconds later, she slowly raised her right hand and used her thumb and index finger to hold Su Huaishang's chin, raising her face slightly. At that moment, the two beautiful faces were inches away from each other. Their eyes met. Time seemed to have stopped. Even time seemed to want to stop at this moment. The tense atmosphere suddenly changed, and it actually became a little ambiguous. 90% of the audience, regardless of gender, swallowed their saliva when they saw this scene. They did not know why. Continue. Yama looked at Su Huaishang with a seductive gaze. What is your name? I am Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang replied calmly, but in her heart, she was already complaining. What's going on? Another Ji Xiaolong, harem city lord? Yama heard this and smiled, then turned around and walked back to where he was standing. As he walked, he said, "All right, I won't pursue the matter of you breaking in. Hey, how can this be? What a superficial world. Long live Shang Shang." Oh, Yama's lily soul has awakened. I've decided I'm going to take a screenshot of that scene and use it as my desktop. Not only did the audience accept this setting, even the members of Red Cherry Blossom. Well done, Captain. Bloody Rose turned around and whispered to Su Huaishang. No wonder you're the captain. Even the NPC is unable to resist your charm. Hyacinth added. Tai Haidang added, looks like the scenario's boss is on our side now. Phew. Su Huaishang sighed and shook her head. I don't know if I should be happy about something like this. On the other hand, at Underworld Frontline, after some preparation in the desert, they quickly caught up to the group of martial arts heroes and followed them into the valley. Even though Brother Ju and the rest did not want to move with these people, there was no reason for them not to take advantage of the free cannon fodder. As expected, in less than 2 minutes after entering the valley, Feng Bujue stopped and turned to tell his teammates, "We've been poisoned." The reason he said, as expected, was because Brother Ju had already predicted the defense mechanism of this place. His conclusion was poison gas was a good solution. With his reminder, Ruo Yu, Xiao Tan, and Hua Jian opened the game menu to check and saw the word poison in their status bar. Is it caused by the fog? Ruo Yu's first reaction was quick and accurate. I believe so, Brother Ju replied. Since it's caused by the fog, Hua Jian said, then it's pointless for me to use my skill to cure you guys because you'll be poisoned again. That's right. We have to understand the mechanism behind this poisoning. Xiaotan scratched his chin and said, based on my prediction, this kind of glowing fog is probably formed from the chemical reaction between certain plants in the valley and the surrounding environment. Based on the law of nature, the natural antidote that can neutralize this kind of poison will be found in the valley. Yes, it's over there. Feng Bujue lazily pointed at a bush not far away from them. Xiao Tan was stunned. To be honest, it was rare for Xiao Tan to show off. If it were not for the fact that he was a medical student and had some knowledge in this field, he would not have expressed his opinion. But as soon as he finished explaining his theory, Brother Ju, a layman, actually gave him an answer. It was a little unbelievable. Your theory is undoubtedly correct, but by bypassing professional knowledge and starting from a purely logical point of view, this can also be deduced. Feng Bujue knew Xiao Tan very well and knew what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. So he immediately explained, from the opening cinematic, we can see that there are people living in the valley. They breathe the air in the valley every day, so they must take the antidote all year round. And the antidote, whether it's water, plants, or animals, in short, it must come from the valley. He spread his hands and smiled. In this day and age, it's impossible to airdrop supplies. Buried Heart Valley is surrounded by desert. If the antidote has to be obtained outside the valley, how troublesome would that be? Yeah, besides, Yama doesn't allow the people in the valley to leave, right? Xiao Tan replied. Hua Jian nodded thoughtfully and said, even if Yama allows it, there are too many variables to go outside the valley to obtain the antidote. What if the people who go to get the antidote don't come back for some reason? Won't the people in the valley be waiting for death? So, the antidote, or the raw materials needed to make the antidote, can only be found in Buried Heart Valley. As Feng Bujue said this, he gestured to his teammates, indicating for them to follow him. The four of them soon arrived at the bush that Brother Ju had pointed out earlier. They found some roots that had been picked behind a few trees. Even though there are some trees between us, I noticed that there are traces of a large area of soil being turned over. Feng Bujue said, "At first, I didn't understand what was going on. But after looking at the status bar, I realized this is obviously done by the people from the Imperial Court. Their purpose is to get rid of the fog poison. Since they have a lot of people, they dug up a lot of soil." Huh. When Xiaotan heard this, he suddenly thought of something. That's strange. The people from the Imperial Court, they just arrived here, and they already found out that they were poisoned? This was indeed a question worth pondering. Up until now, none of the martial artists who walked in front of the players had noticed that they were poisoned. This meant that the fog poison in the valley did not have any obvious physical effects, at least when they were first poisoned. The players in the game could directly see their abnormal status through the status bar. But how did the people from the Imperial Court notice it? "Everyone, please wait." Just as Xiaotan raised his question, Alliance Master Yuan's voice rang out from about 300 feet ahead of them. "There's poison in the fog." A few seconds later, Alliance Master Yuan told them a rather nasty truth, and it caused a commotion among the crowd. "Everyone, don't panic. Use your inner energy to protect your heart meridian, and you can slow down the poison." After all, Alliance Master Yuan was the leader of Wulin, and he was very experienced. He quickly came up with a theory that was similar to Xiaotan and Brother Ju's. Then he had the people who were well-versed in medicine go around the area to see if there was anything that could neutralize the poison. By then, the four from Underworld Frontline had already neutralized the poison, and each of them had left some antidotes in their backpacks. "I think I get it now." Feng Bujue thought about it for a few minutes before saying, "Those with higher mastery of internal energy should be able to notice that they have been poisoned faster and more sensitive than normal people." He paused. Therefore, that Alliance leader Yuan was the first to discover this. His eyes shifted slightly, and he said, "From this, we can gain some additional information." Ruo Yu's train of thought followed Brother Ju's. When she heard this, she said, "Among the people from the Imperial Court, there's at least one person whose inner energy cultivation is not lower than that of the leader of Wulin, and another person who is well-versed in medicine and can identify the antidote quickly." "That's right," Brother Ju said. "Of course, the two people you mentioned could be the same person." They chatted leisurely, but they did not tell the NPCs where the antidote was. Fortunately, there were some people who were well-versed in Chinese herbs and medicine among the Wulin heroes. They spent more than 10 minutes to find a root that could neutralize the fog poison. About 30 minutes later, the hundreds of people finally swallowed the antidote, adjusted their breathing, and were ready to continue their journey. However, at this moment, there was another change. Swish, 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 swish. The sound of wind breaking came from the air. At first glance, this sound was very ordinary. Everyone present had heard the sound of this kind of hidden weapon before. However, when the thing that caused the sound of wind approached, they felt a strong and gloomy, murderous intent. The sound of many weapons being unsheathed followed the sound of wind breaking, rising and falling one after another. However, there was no sound of metal clashing. This meant that not a single one of those hidden weapons had been blocked. Therefore, after a few seconds, some people were dead and some were still alive. The dead people fell to the ground, and the living people screamed in shock. The person who threw the hidden weapons used his inner energy to transmit his words into the people's ears. "If we move forward, more people will die." At the same time, Alliance Master Yuan walked quickly to the nearest corpse and looked at the hidden weapon in the wound. At that moment, his expression changed. "This is moon-attracting flying star dart," he murmured. Then he channeled his inner energy and said loudly, "Humph. I was wondering who it was. So it's Star Moon Godly Dart Song Witchy." There is a hint of disdain in his tone. 15 years ago, Your Excellency colluded with bandits and killed your own sworn brother. You raped your own daughter and slaughtered your entire family. These bestial acts have not been forgotten by the martial artists. Alliance Master Yuan said righteously, "Now, you still dare to be a dog blocking the way in front of the heroes. You really don't know what's good for you." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised one of his palms. Alliance Master Yuan used his inner energy to sound out and confirm Song Wuqi's hiding place. Therefore, after he finished speaking, he channeled 70% of his inner energy and slammed his palm towards Song Wuqi. Chapter 1039. It was a cold winter night. The sky was dark purple and the ground was silver white. Yuan Qi came out of a tavern and walked into a secluded alley, still a little drunk. It was his 30th birthday. At 30 years old, Yuan Qi was still a third-rate figure in the martial arts world. In terms of appearance, he could be considered ordinary and could not be considered handsome. In terms of intelligence, he could be considered reasonable, but he couldn't be considered smart. As for martial arts, he was indeed better than the average person. Unfortunately, his master was just a third-rate person like him, and could only teach him some superficial martial arts. All in all, he was a man with mediocre looks, mediocre intelligence, and mediocre martial arts. In the martial arts world, people like him would never be able to make a name for themselves. If someone had said to him, "You could be the leader of the martial arts world in the future," he would have thought it was a joke or even a mockery. However, someone really did say it. It was a blind fortune teller with a hunched back and a face full of ulcers. On this cold winter night, the blind man sat at a broken table by the roadside with a long banner propped up, waiting for customers. Yuan Qi, who was passing by, saw the blind man and walked over to sit at the table. "Sir, it's late," Yuan Qi said. "So what?" The blind man's voice was very strange. It was very hoarse, as if someone was strangling him. "There's no one on the street," Yuan Qi said. "I know," the blind man replied. "I can hear it." Yuan Qi smiled and shook his head. "Sir, I have some loose silver here. You could take it and go back. I'm not a beggar." The blind man knew what Yuan Qi was trying to say and interrupted him. Yuan Qi pursed his lips, thinking that the blind man didn't know what was good for him. However, on second thought, he felt that the blind man had some strength of character. Then, "Sir, please read my fortune," Yuan Qi said after some thought. "Sure, what do you want to ask?" the blind man asked. Yuan Qi chuckled. Originally, he didn't want to do any fortune-telling, but he saw that the blind man was pitiful. He was still standing on the street in the cold, so he wanted to give him a few taels of silver to let him go back. But since he didn't want to, Yuan Qi casually replied, "Then I'll ask about your future." Yuan Qi knew a thing or two about fortune-telling. It was a skill that required careful observation of one's words and body language. It was not easy to make a living out of empty promises. Flattering, coaxing, provoking, scaring. Different people needed different ways of dealing with them. If one wanted to make a living in this field, one had to prepare at least dozens of speeches. Not only did one have to know them by heart, one had to know how to improvise. If one spoke well, it wouldn't be difficult to earn some money to make a living. However, if one said something wrong, not getting paid was considered light. Being beaten and scolded by others was also a common occurrence. Yuan Qi had been in Jianghu for many years and had interacted with people from all walks of life. He knew a thing or two about all kinds of things. At this moment, he did not want to make things difficult for the blind man, so he asked a beginner question. In his heart, he thought it would be enough to listen to him brag a little. Unexpectedly, "All right," the blind man said and stretched out his hands. "Dear customer, let me touch your face." Yuan Qi looked at the man's rough and skinny hands and shook his head with a bitter smile. All right. He was a big and burly man, so he wasn't afraid that this blind man would take advantage of him. If he wanted to touch him, then so be it. So Yuan Qi guided the blind man's hands and placed them on his temples. To Yuan Qi's surprise, the blind man's hands were very warm and not as cold as he had imagined. His hands were also very strong and gave off a sense of sturdiness that did not match his appearance. Soon the blind man had touched Yuan Qi's forehead, cheeks, chin, even the top of his head and behind his ears. Then he retracted his hands. "Huh, Yuan Chi saw that the blind man had lowered his head and did not speak. He guessed that the blind man was going to deliberately mystify him. He laughed and asked, "How is it, mister? Since you're asking about your future, I'll give you one." The blind man replied in a low voice, "From today onwards, you will practice martial arts as usual and walk the martial arts world. Within 10 years, there will be no more than 3 people who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the martial arts world. By then, if you haven't deviated from the right path, the position of the chief of the martial arts world will be yours." When Yuan Chi heard this, he was stunned for a while before he reacted. Then he laughed out loud. Ha ha ha! He laughed so hard that he could barely open his eyes. "Mister, according to what you said, as long as I practice martial arts diligently and don't do evil, I'll be successful in 10 years' time, at most?" The blind man did not answer his question. Instead, he asked him a question. "Is today your birthday?" Yuan Chi was stunned when he heard this. Then, a suspicious look appeared on his face as he replied, "Yes." He did not know how the blind man guessed that today was his birthday. He only knew that it was not a stupid question like, "Have you been troubled in your life recently?" It was a fact that the probability of him getting it right was less than 1 in 300. "Good." After receiving a reply, the blind man said loudly, "Good." Then he said, "It seems that this is the will of the heavens." He muttered a few strange words. Then he suddenly grabbed Yuan Chi's left arm that was resting on the table. At this moment, Yuan Chi was mostly sober. He took a deep breath of cold air to clear his mind. "Mister, what do you mean? You've been practicing martial arts since you were 12. You've only been apprenticed to one master. You've learned 4.5 sets of martial arts from him, and 4 of them are the worst of the worst." The blind man suddenly started talking to himself. Yuan Chi's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. This was because what the blind man said was exactly the truth. When Yuan Chi was young, he came from a wealthy family. He went to private school for a few years, but he was not cut out for studying. Even after a few years, he did not make much progress. So, when he was 12, his father invited a very famous martial arts master in the county. Yuan Chi became his disciple, and from then on, he gave up his studies and started practicing martial arts. Of course, this martial arts master's fame was limited to the county where Yuan Chi's family lived. In the martial arts world, he was a third-rate figure. Fortunately, although this old master's martial arts skills were limited, his ethics were impeccable. He taught Yuan Chi everything he knew and strictly supervised him. Before he died, he even passed on half of his master's secret manual to Yuan Chi. Who are you?" Yuan Chi asked in shock. "How do you know?" The blind man ignored Yuan Chi's question. He grabbed Yuan Chi's arm and continued. "The half set of martial arts you didn't learn is called Faded Star Mysterious Technique. It's a peerless technique that has been lost for a long time." While the blind man was talking, Yuan Chi felt a warm current flowing into his arm and moving in a specific pattern in his meridians. This type of martial arts is very strange. No matter how much you practice, you won't feel any improvement in your skills. The blind man explained calmly as he channeled the energy into Yuan Chi. Every year, the Faded Star Mysterious Technique can only be improved once, and the time to do so must be on the day of the practitioner's birthday. Once that day is missed, then the cultivator's previous year's worth of painstaking cultivation will all go up in smoke. Hearing this, Yuan Chi's mind buzzed, and he almost fainted. Obviously, Yuan Chi had practiced the Faded Star Mysterious Technique before, and he had studied it very hard. Even if he didn't know that this was a peerless martial art, and didn't even know what the martial art he was practicing was called, he could still see that the mental cultivation method in the half of the secret manual was much more profound than the martial arts taught by his master. Anyone who mingled in the martial arts world was ambitious. Yuan Chi also knew that for someone like him who was still mediocre at the age of 30, that half of the secret manual was probably his last hope to make a name for himself. However, in the past few years, no matter how hard he tried to practice that half of the mental cultivation method, he couldn't use it to improve his skills. He felt that it was more practical to practice those shallow martial arts. At least he could feel that his skills were gradually improving. Until today, when he heard the blind man's words, Yuan Shi finally knew the secret hidden in that half of the secret manual. Senior, Yuan Shi had changed the way he addressed the blind man because he knew that the man in front of him was not a fortune teller, but an expert that he had never met before. Stop talking. The blind man interrupted him again. Remember the direction of my cultivation method. This is not in your half of the secret manual. Yuan Shi heard this and immediately closed his eyes, concentrating on memorizing it. He was a man with bad luck, so he knew that he had to seize the opportunity. Yuan Shi knew that he wasn't the kind of martial arts genius who could master it in one try. In this fortuitous encounter, he probably wouldn't have a second chance, so he had to try his best to remember the other party's cultivation method. The north wind whistled and the night grew darker. After an unknown period of time, the blind man withdrew his inner energy and let go of Yuan Shi's hand. All right, I've used my inner energy to help you break through the destiny mysterious technique. This year's end, the mysterious technique that you've accumulated in the past year has been activated. I'm sure you can feel it. The blind man's breathing was still very steady when he spoke, which showed that his inner energy was unfathomable. From today onwards, you'll still cultivate according to the mental cultivation method in your half of the secret manual. On your birthday, use the method I taught you today to circulate your inner energy. Only then can you unleash the true power of the destiny mysterious technique. Before he could finish speaking, Yuan Shi had already knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times while trembling. Thank you, Senior. Yuan Shi almost choked with sobs as he said these 4 words. Naturally, this was not some kind of performance. It was an action that came from the bottom of his heart. Yuan Shi's forehead was already bleeding on the cold snow. His eyes were also filled with tears. These tears carried too many emotions of a mediocre person: bitterness, helplessness, despair, lamentation, joy, longing, excitement, and sorrow. That moment of realization was something that Yuan Shi would never forget. No need to thank me. As I said, this is the will of the heavens. As the blind man spoke, he stood up and fumbled for the wooden banner beside him. For you to be able to meet me at this time and place, and for me to tell your fortune, this is something that only the heavens can predict. He paused and continued. Actually, before you even sat down, I've already found out about 70 to 80% of your martial arts and inner energy. When I raise my hand to feel your bones, I want to tell your fortune, but I didn't expect to find half of the destiny mysterious technique. When the blind man said this, he slowly turned around and continued. In today's Wulian world, the people who can create their own martial arts are almost extinct, and the divine skills left behind by the ancestors are gradually being lost in the hands of idiots who know how to teach, but don't know how to learn, but don't know how to teach. He shook his head and coldly snorted. Humph, I met you by chance. If my little effort today can make the destiny mysterious technique reappear in the world, it could be considered as adding some interest to the martial arts world, which is getting worse and worse with each generation. At that time, Yuan Shi couldn't understand the meaning of the blind man's words at all, but 20 years later, Alliance Master Yuan seemed to understand. For those ordinary people who struggled in Jianghu, obtaining was the most important thing. Peerless martial arts, great wealth, great fame. These were all things that they wanted to obtain. But for an otherworldly expert like the blind man, obtaining wasn't that important. When one's martial arts reached a level where it was difficult to obtain defeat, what one obtained was loneliness. When one's wealth reached an uncountable amount, what one obtained was numbness. When one's fame reached a level where the world knew about it, what one obtained was emptiness. A person who was strong to the point of loneliness, numbness, and emptiness would either walk towards destruction or transcendence. Blind was clearly a transcendent person. Transcendent people would cross oceans for a moment of glory and would stop moving forward for a speck of dust. However, they would not toil for fame and fortune, nor would they feel great sorrow or joy for the gains and losses in front of them. Unfortunately, Although Yuan Shi understood many things now, he was no longer the Yuan Shi of the past. He knew what a transcendental person was like, so he also knew that he could never become that kind of person. 20 years later, in Buried Heart Valley, boom! A gust of wind blew, and the palm shadow was like a mountain. Who in a martial arts world could block Yuan Shi's 70% power? The answer was no one could. Unlike those famous people who became famous at a young age and had a smooth life, the first half of Yuan Shi's life was miserable. He deeply understood the pain of being a mediocre person, and the fear of this pain was his endless motivation. Driven by this motivation, Yuan Shi's cultivation of mysterious art far exceeded the blind man's estimation. After 20 years of accumulation and 20 breakthroughs, Yuan Shi's faded star mysterious art had long reached the realm of perfection. Since he ascended to the throne of the Wulin Alliance with the title of #1 martial artist in the world 10 years ago, he had never used his full strength again. Because since then, in the entire martial arts world, there was no one who could be on par with him. In the blink of an eye, the power of Yuan Shi's palm easily broke a big tree and conveniently split Song Wuqi, who was hiding behind the tree trunk, into two. The blood and organs that spurted out were particularly eye-catching in the green forest. Under the light of the fog, it was as if they were glowing. None of the martial artists who had witnessed this palm strike were not amazed by Yuan Shi's strength. To them, that palm strike was simply a realm that they would never be able to reach in their lifetime. However, there were also people who showed disdain and ridiculed. Tisk, it's not that strong. I'll develop the performance of Rankyaku again, and I should be able to kick out a move with similar power. I'm curious. Hua Jian ignored Brother Zhu and said, in a wuxia scenario, will a humanoid NPC of this level be killed by a normal bullet? Yes, we've tried. Actually, bullets have a miraculous effect in this kind of scenario. Most of the NPCs that are not that strong can be killed by a normal gun, and they're practically defenseless against this kind of attack. Even though this is not the case for boss-level NPCs, they can still be killed from a long distance with a more powerful shooting skill. That's right, Ruayu said. Hua Jian sighed. I suddenly feel like there's a problem with the arrangement of the players for this match. TSK. Brother Zhu knew what missing meant. So he shook his head and said, so what if Xiao can counter the NPCs in the scenario? We're having competition, okay? The lineup I arranged is to deal with Red Cherry, not the scenario. Furthermore, the scenario is random, so how would I know it will be a wuxia world? Why would someone who is so obsessed with completing the scenario use such an excuse? Ruayu said coldly. Then I'll have to see how you're so focused on the competition. Chapter 1040. When a person stayed in Jianghu for a long time, he would learn how to communicate with the dead. The dead could not speak, but they could still tell the living many things. Moreover, the dead were often more honest than the living. At this moment, Song Wuqi was already a dead man, and the people standing around his corpse were all living people. These living people came to check the corpse after asking for Alliance Master Yuan's permission. Without a doubt, they were all experts in this field. In just a few minutes, these people learned many things from the corpse that was cut into two. If I remember correctly, 15 years ago, Song Wuqi was already 37 years old. Yes, he was already 37 years old. He practiced hidden weapons. He only practiced hidden weapons. Hidden weapons are easy to learn, but difficult to master. It's hard to reach the ultimate level in hidden weapons. After the age of 40, people who practice concealed weapon martial arts usually won't make any progress in their external skills and realms. However, the 52-year-old Song Wuqi's external skills are better than before. It's the same for his internal skills. After those people finished checking the corpse, they began to talk in front of Alliance Master Yuan. Their conclusion was obvious. In the past 15 years, Song Wuqi must have received guidance from an expert. That was why he could improve his martial arts to a new level at an age when his physical strength and energy had already passed the peak. Of course, Even if Song Wuqi had become a first-class master from a quasi-first-class master, he could not escape the fate of being killed by Yuan Qi. Heroes. Not long after, Alliance Master Yuan organized his words. Then, he channeled his inner strength and spoke loudly to the Jianghu fellows. Everyone has seen it. His tone was obviously provocative. Let's not talk about how many Jianghu scum and beast the king of hell has sheltered over the years. Let's talk about this Song Wuqi in front of us. After entering the valley for 15 years, his martial arts have improved greatly. At this point, the crowd began to talk among themselves. It seems that Buried Heart Valley is a place where evil people live and cultivate evil. Yuan Qi had been the willing alliance master for 10 years. According to his experience, there were some things that had to be said clearly. This was because there were indeed many people who were so stupid that they wouldn't understand if he didn't point it out. I think the other scum who escaped into the valley must be the same as Song Wuqi. They must have received guidance from the King of Hell and have greatly improved their skills. Heroes, you must not be careless. At this point, everyone naturally understood what he meant. Thank you for your reminder, Alliance Master. Alliance Master's foresight is truly admirable. There were also many people who took advantage of the opportunity to flatter him. As for the underworld frontline, let's go. Feng Bujue suddenly suggested. Aren't we going to follow them? Hua Jian asked. There's so many free cannon fodder. These people are completely unreliable. Brother Zhu shook his head and replied lazily. Some of them gathered here for the art of immortality, which is profit. Some of them are here to stand out in this operation, which is fame. He paused for a moment. Whether it's fame or profit, it's ultimately about chasing after one's own desires and not beliefs. When people are in a life-and-death situation, their beliefs may not be reliable, let alone their desires. To put it simply, if the situation starts to worsen, staying with these people will become a hidden worry. His teammates listened to him and pondered for a moment. A few seconds later, Ruo Yu was the first to speak. That makes sense. The alliance formed by these gangs is very fragile. Every faction and every person has their own selfish motives. Now that they feel that the situation is favorable, they're following behind Alliance Master Yuan to show off their strength, hoping to get a share of the profits. Once the situation changes, these people will show their true colors. She paused for half a second. She looked at Xiao Tan and Houghton and said, for example, the sects that are on good terms with each other might work together to harm the sects that are on bad terms with them, or they might target the smaller sects and force them to be cannon fodder. Xiao Tan heard this, and his expression changed slightly. Smaller factions? Then it must be Broken Sword Shahitsu. What's Broken Sword Shahitsu? Hua Jian asked curiously. We're Broken Sword Shahitsu, Feng Bujue replied with a smile. Hua Jian was startled, but she was soon reminded of what Ruo Yu said earlier about coming to this world in the past. She said, is it the identity that you used to come to this world? That's right. I'm the leader, and you're all my disciples, Feng Bujue said and raised his hand to signal to Ruo Yu. This is the wife of the leader. The wife of the leader is no longer necessary, right? Ruo Yu asked. Indeed, at Chonglin Town, Ruo Yu had agreed to it, because she wanted to cooperate with Feng Bujue to create an excuse to kill him. Don't mind the details. Feng Bujue opened his arms and replied with an expression that was enough to raise Ruo Yu's strength by 10%. That's enough. Didn't you want us to leave the group? Then, lead the way. Ruo Yu did not want to continue this topic with him, so she changed the topic. I believe you've already decided where to go before you came up with this suggestion, right? Humph. Of course. Feng Bujue titled his head and glanced at the forest on the left side of the group. Song Wuqi should have come from this direction. His teammates all looked in that direction, but they only saw a jumble of trees and no obvious path. However, several seconds later, Xiao Tan widened his eyes and said, there are indeed traces left behind. Stop yelling. Feng Bujue quickly stepped forward to clamp his hand over Xiao Tan's mouth. Are you afraid that no one will notice us? To be honest, No one really paid them any attention. The big shots of Jianghu in front of him were either famous masters who traveled alone in Jianghu, or sect leader-level masters who were in charge of prestigious sects and clans. The followers they brought with them were also the disciples or trusted aides who had the highest seniority and martial arts skills in their respective sections. It could be said that the people gathered here today were all outstanding figures of their generation. How would such a group of people have the time to pay attention to a few unknown juniors like you? Only ghosts would know where you came from. People would fight to show their faces in front of the leader to claim credit. You bastards should just stay where you are. As a result, after a short detour and observation, Feng Bujue and the others secretly left the group of hundreds of people. They also left the main road that ran through the valley and turned into the forest. Like most experts who were good at using hidden weapons, Song Wuqi's Qinggong was not bad. It was very difficult to track the traces he left behind in the complicated terrain of the forest. Although Yuan Qi could use his internal energy to detect the real-time position of the other party, he could not find the route that the other party had taken previously. However, this was a piece of cake for Feng Bujue and Wang Tanji. One of them had a data perspective, while the other had eagle vision. For them, the more complicated the terrain was, the easier it was to track the other party. To make a long story short, after more than 20 minutes of trekking, the four people from Hell Frontline finally walked out of the dense forest and came to a relatively wide valley. At this time, the sun had completely set. Without the sunlight, the fog showed a soft and cold color that was similar to the moonlight. The misty light was bleak and beautiful. The players' hearts seemed to have calmed down along with the change of color around them. As it disappeared, finally, beside a small river, the traces left by Song Wuqi disappeared. Brother Ju immediately snorted unhappily. "I don't think it matters," Hua Jian said. "There are people living in this valley all year round, and those people's lives can't be separated from the water source. As long as we walk upstream along the river, there should be a high chance that we can reach the villa in the opening cinematic." "You're right." Ruo Yu also agreed with her deduction. Perhaps the disappearance of Song Wuqi's tracks here is a hint that he came along the river. "That makes sense." Xiaodan also added, "Maybe he has the kind of martial arts that allows him to cross the river on a reed and float all the way here." Feng Bujue heard this and immediately looked at Xiao Tan with narrowed eyes. "This is why you can't be a detective." "Huh?" Xiao Tan replied, "Why?" "Because for those who have the slightest bit of analytical talent, before coming up with the idea of crossing the river on a reed, they would first consider whether the other party came on a raft or a small boat." Feng Bujue's answer hit the nail on the head. "That's not right." Xiao Tan asked again, "If Song Wuqi came on a boat, then where is the boat?" "Someone rowed it away," Feng Bujue replied. "Who said that Song Wuqi had to row the boat alone? It's normal for there to be other people on the boat, right?" Xiao Tan smiled awkwardly. "You're right." After ridiculing his teammates, Brother Ju led the team up the river. In this late autumn night, moving forward in the damp fog, the players' hair, face, and clothes were gradually covered with a layer of frost. The moisture quickly turned into traces of coldness, making them more spirited. As the terrain by the river was relatively flat, the four of them moved much faster than in the forest. They walked a few kilometers in less than half an hour. Then, a clear spring appeared in front of them. It was a small pool surrounded by all kinds of strange mountain rocks. The river passed through the two ends of the stone pool. The terrain upstream was abruptly higher, and downstream was gradually flatter. At this moment, on the edge of the stone pool, there was a figure standing alone. It was a thin figure, wearing a long white robe. His left hand was behind his back, clenched into a fist, and his right hand held a wine pot. He silently looked at the stone pool in front of him, and occasionally picked up the wine pot to take a sip. In the middle of the stone pool, there was only water, and there was no moon in the water. No one knew what he was looking at, and no one thought there was anything interesting there. However, he had been standing there for a long time with great interest, and he had no intention of leaving. When they were 100 meters away, the person noticed the presence of the players. When Feng Bujue and the others were less than 10 meters away, he slowly turned his head and said, "This is really meeting people everywhere." Before the person spoke, Brother Jew had already recognized him. Therefore, Brother Jew calmly saluted with his fists and said, "Greetings, Eunuch Chao." That's right, the person drinking by the stone pool was Chao Qin. "It's been more than 10 years since we parted at the Forbidden City," Chao Qin said. "Master Feng is indeed an extraordinary person. You can conceal your identity in the world and disappear without a trace for decades. And every time you appear, you still look so youthful." As he spoke, he turned around. However, the next second, Chao Qin's expression changed, and he exclaimed softly, "Ha!" Feng Bujua chuckled. He knew that Chao Qin was confused because he saw that his teammate didn't age, so he explained, "Eunuch Chao is right. The martial arts of broken sword Chihitsu do have the effect of prolonging one's life. So my disciple and I, however," before he could finish, Chao Qin cut him off. "Isn't your wife dead?" Feng Bujue was suddenly reminded of the time when he had a duel with Su Huaishang at the Forbidden City. For the sake of the occasion, he did say something like, "Bury me with my wife." "Well, actually, she's not dead." Chao Qin asked. "Then, that Su Huaishang from back then was obsessed with you even though she knew that your wife was not dead?" When that was said, the whole world fell silent. About 5 seconds later, all the livestream platforms exploded like a pot of boiling oil, ushering in the scariest round of bullet comments in the history of gaming livestreams. "Oh," Ruo Yu glanced over expressionlessly and gave her brother Ju a murderous look. "Is that true?" "Yes." Hua Jian looked at him with a gloating look. "Is that true?" "Huh?" Xiao Tan asked curiously. "Is that true?" "No. That. Actually," Feng Bujua mumbled to Chao Qin, "she doesn't know that she is still alive." "Then why did you hide it from her?" Chao Qin asked. "If you told Su Huai that your wife is still alive, perhaps she would stop bothering you." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something. "Wait a minute. Could it be that you're playing hard to get? Are you purposely not telling her that your wife is still alive?" He paused. "Or, Su Huai has already expressed to you that she is willing to be a concubine? That's why you did the opposite?" F***ck. Feng Bujue was shocked. He cursed in his mind, "You stupid eunuch, will you grow an organ if you talk less? You're already so old, yet you are still so gossipy and melodramatic, and your memory is so good. Are you trying to kill me?" At this time, Ruo Yu said thoughtfully, "I think I suddenly understand why you called her fourth aunt in the harem city." Actually, she had already guessed that this was just a misunderstanding by the NPC, but it was a rare opportunity to tease Feng Bujue in public. Ruo Yu did not want to miss it. "That Eunuch Chao." Feng Bujue held it in for a long time before he finally said, "Can we talk about something else? Like the weather or something?" "Weather?" Chao Qin was stunned when he heard this. He looked up at the glowing fog above his head. Then he chuckled and took a sip of wine. Then, he said in a sarcastic tone, "I am also drunk." Chapter 1041. Death Penalty. Absolute Death Penalty. Death Penalty plus 65,535. Who the hell is Andy for? How dare he spread the rumor that Shang is obsessed with you in the scenario? Burn this be * starred to death. Feng Bujue has to die. Su Huaishang's official fan club has declared that Feng Bujue's head is ours. Shang's personal guards are ready. Execute Feng Bujue without mercy. Since the semifinals were broadcasted at different times, all the viewers who were following tournament for the best S2 were watching the same match. And their feelings when they saw this scene were basically reflected in the bullet screen and comments above. Of course, most of them were just complaining. Everyone understood that Eunuch Chao's conclusion must have been made after he was tricked in one of the scenarios. No one would treat a misunderstanding in the game world seriously. But, even so, Feng Bujue's actions were unforgivable. Goddess Su's fans all agreed that it would be better for him to die. After the discussion outside the game, the focus returned to the scenario. After an awkward silence, Chao Xian spoke again. "By the way, Master Feng, I do have something that I wish to ask you. He looked at Brother Jew and used a non-committal tone to ask. Back then, at the peak of the Forbidden City, you and that Miss Sue dissolved into white light one after another. What kind of spell did you use? Oh, that. Feng Bujue was experienced in answering questions like this. Yuna Chao has been practicing martial arts for a long time. Can't you tell? He sounded like he had said something, but in other words, he had thrown the question back at Chao Xian. Chao Xian smiled when he heard that. Ah, Master Feng is still the same. Fine, if you don't want to tell me, I won't force you. Compared to the last time he met his brother Ju, Chao Xian's personality had changed. 10 years ago, there was still some hostility about him. From his attitude toward the three martial artists, one could see that even though he was not bloodthirsty, he was not tired of killing. He could be merciful, but he could not be called merciful. He had lost interest in fame, but he was still obsessed with respect. However, more than 10 years had passed. Now, Chao Xian's face and body had recovered to the age of 40. In fact, he looked even younger than when he was at Chonglin Town. His every word and action always revealed a hint of indifference, a hint of carefreeness, and a hint of cynicism that didn't match his age. The matters of Jianghu, the matters of martial arts, and the matters between people. He listened and asked, but he no longer cared and was not obsessed with them. With Chao Xian's current realm, he was more concerned with how should he view the world. As for how the world viewed him, he could just laugh it off. That's very good, Feng Bujue replied and took the opportunity to ask, speaking of which, I also have something I don't understand and would like to ask for your advice. He glanced at the stone pool. As the saying goes, it's hard to drink without wine. Why is eunuch Chao drinking wine and gazing at the spring alone in the middle of the night? Brother Ju did not ask why Chao Xian would appear at Berry Heart Valley, because that was something that he could easily deduce. He had probably entered the valley together with a group of soldiers from the imperial court at the beginning of the movie. The thing that Brother Ju could not figure out was the question before him. Oh, about that. Chao Xian chuckled. 2 hours ago, I stopped here and suddenly came across a new set of martial arts. I'm currently working on it. Xiao Tan heard that and asked with curiosity, you will be able to perfect your martial arts while standing and drinking wine? Ha ha. Hearing that, Chao Xian guffawed. Little brother, then what do you think I should do? Have you set up a posture by the side of the stone pool to practice your martial arts? Xiao Tan wanted to answer with a yes, but he felt like the man did not sound like he was asking a question. Ha! I have embarrassed myself in front of eunuch Chao. Feng Bujue quickly interrupted. This disciple of mine has the worst aptitude among all the guests. Back then, I saw that he had delicate features and thought that he was a smart kid. I did not expect him to be a fool when I accepted him as my disciple. Look, he has been with me for decades, but his martial arts level is still very low. Oh, Chao Xian nodded. Master Feng, it is not easy for you. The two of them talked back and forth like two adults talking about a kid. It was very irritating. Fortunately, Xiao Tan had a good temper, or rather, he was born with a good temperament. He did not take it to heart. Speaking of which, after chatting for a while, Feng Bujue felt that the time was right, so he changed the topic to the plot. If I am not wrong, this time eunuch Chao came to Buried Heart Valley to obtain the art of immortality for the emperor? Master Feng, you are very well informed. Chao Xian's response was equivalent to agreeing with Brother Ju's words. Eunuch Chao, you must be joking. Feng Bujue laughed. Isn't this an open secret? This question was also a test. Haha, that is true. Chao Xian continued. The King of Hell in Buried Heart Valley has the art of immortality. The news of the Emperor's critical illness could not be hidden. At this time, the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, the deputy of the Governor General's office, and I all rushed here together. Their purpose is obvious. 2 seconds later, Brother Ju nodded and said, those people in the Jianghu must have heard about this before they acted. Sigh. Humans have this problem. Chao Xian shook his head and sighed. The legend of the King of Hell has been circulating in the Jianghu for decades. Many people know about it, but very few believe it. As for those who dare to come here to investigate, you can count them on one hand. He paused for a few seconds and drank another mouthful of wine. But now, once the emperor's secret edict was released, the soldiers of the imperial court were mobilized, and these people couldn't sit still. Suddenly, they all believed it and came. He smiled. But what about the reality? Humph. Regarding the art of immortality, the emperor himself only believed 30% of it. To put it bluntly, he knew that he was about to die and wanted to make a last resort. That's why he issued the secret edict. Eunuch Xiao, Feng Bujue heard this and laughed mockingly. Your words are treasonous. 9 generations of your family will be executed. Huh. Chao Xian waved his sleeves. Why would I care about that? He looked up at the sky. If it wasn't to repay the previous emperor's appreciation and kindness, I would have left the imperial court long ago. Who in this world can stop me? He drank another mouthful of wine. As for the execution of 9 generations of my family, I'm a eunuch. When I entered the imperial palace, I was already alone. After entering the imperial palace, it's impossible for me to have any descendants. If you want to execute someone, go for those who have acknowledged me as their godfather and godgrandfather. Most of them are treacherous people who want to curry favor with those in power. One less is one less. Then, Feng Bujue heard this and roughly understood Chao Xian's position. He asked, Eunuch Chao, what do you think and plan about the current situation in the valley? Plan? Huh. What do I have to plan? Chao Xian asked back. If I had a plan, would I come here alone to drink wine and admire the spring? Alliance Master Yuan and those martial artists are here to kill and steal the technique. Hua Jian reminded him. Aren't you afraid that the imperial court's troops will be wiped out by them? Chao Xian heard this and glanced at Hua Jian. Then, he revealed a meaningful smile. Miss, you seem to have underestimated someone. Oh, Hua Jian was puzzled. Who? Chao Xian's answer was very unexpected. Yuan Qi. Alliance Master Yuan? Hua Jian asked again. She had just learned the full name of the Alliance Master of Wulin. Yes, Chao Xian replied. It sounds like, Eunuch Xiao, you seem to know something? Feng Bujue heard more information from Chao Xian's words. Yes, I know a lot, Chao Xian replied. Eunuch Xiao, then can you let us know? Feng Bujue asked with a smile. Chao Xian muttered. It's too boring to just say it like this. After that, he walked down from the stone pond. Everyone, follow me. I'll bring you to watch a good show. At the same time, in another part of Buried Heart Valley. At this time, Alliance Master Yuan had led the martial artists along the main road for a long time. Along the way, they had been attacked by more than 10 little ghosts. Although there was a godly person like Yuan Qi, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. After all, there were hundreds of them moving together, and the terrain of Buried Heart Valley was very complicated. There were mountains, rocks, forests, valleys, and water. Moreover, it was shrouded in light and fog. If the little ghosts in the valley wanted to set up an ambush, it would be a piece of cake. Moreover, the residents of Buried Heart Valley were all tough fighters. Many of them were first-class figures in the Jianghu before they entered the valley, and after they entered the valley, their martial arts improved even more. Someone like Song Wuqi was basically a nobody in the valley, and there were many people who were more powerful than him. Being ambushed repeatedly by such a group of people, it was impossible for them not to lose at least 1 or 2 people. Alliance Master. The total number of casualties from all the sects is more than 100 people. If this continues, I'm afraid. The person who spoke was called Jinong. He was the descendant of Ji Tong, the head of Octagon Tower. He was also the current head of Octagon Tower. His mastery of the supreme mantra of 8 directions was a few notches below that of his ancestors. But in terms of martial arts, he could still be considered an outstanding talent among the masters of the sect around him. This is a good chance to explain the world, so I'll give you a brief introduction. After the sword competition in Chonglin, the structure of the Jianghu in this world changed greatly. The original ranking of 1 residence, 2 towers, 3 sects for clans was completely overturned. After that incident, the Yi family suffered a great loss, and they never recovered from it. At least in the past few decades, the Yi family did not have another expert who could be mentioned in the same breath as the old head of the family, Yi Cheng. Even those who had reached the level of the 6 flowery blades could not be found. Therefore, Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagon Tower rose to the top, and they became the 2 strongest forces in the Jianghu. As for the 3 sects and 4 clans, it could be summed up as declining in the process of inheritance. Just like what the blind man who taught Yuan Shi said, many people knew how to teach but did not learn, and some knew how to learn but did not teach. The tradition of seniority in the Jianghu was deeply rooted, and there was no lack of conflicts between the same generation. This resulted in the leader of the Jianghu not being the one with the highest talent or kung fu in the Jianghu. Of course, it did not mean that the one with the highest talent was the most suitable to be the leader, but in the matter of passing down kung fu, that was the key, unless there was a prodigy who could revive the Jianghu. Otherwise, as the tradition continued, the kung fu would deteriorate with each generation. In any case, this pattern was maintained for more than 20 years. It was not until 15 years ago, when Yuan Shi, who had practiced Fengshan Xiangong for 5 years, made a name for himself in the Jianghu, that the situation in the Jianghu changed again. Another 5 years passed, and Yuan Shi had become a hero who stood above all the other sections. In terms of character, he was impeccable, and when he fought against the evil, he was able to defeat thousands of soldiers alone. Most importantly, his kung fu was invincible. The invincible here was naturally limited to the Jianghu and not the imperial court. Therefore, Yuan Shi naturally became the leader of the Jianghu. That was the general change in this scenario over the past few decades. Tower Master Ji. Yuan Shi heard what Jineng said and replied in a low voice. Are you afraid of the battle? No. Where did that come from? Jineng denied it verbally, but internally, he was very anxious. Since Octagon Spire was at the front, according to the ratio, the number of disciples who died was quite high. But I think this action is a bit inappropriate. Tower Master Ji is right, and I think so too. The next second, a few leaders gathered around Jineng and agreed. Looks like Ruoyu's earlier deduction was spot on. When a situation changed, these fellows, for their own benefit, they would start to side with those who were not. Based on my humble opinion, we should choose a few people with suitable kung fu from the various sects and spread them out as scouts to test the enemy. That's right, this way, we won't be constantly attacked. That's right, Leader Yuan, the enemy is in the dark, and we're in the open. All right, there's no need to say anymore. How could Yuan Shi not understand what they meant? He was no longer the third-rate person he was 20 years ago. He was much more scheming and shrewd than the people around him. Since all the sect masters have the same idea, then let's do as you say. After Yuan Shi said that, he thought for a moment and prepared to turn around to pass on the message. Unexpectedly, at that moment, a bunch of snakes and rats. You can't be driven away, and now you want to fight among yourselves. What a joke. A loud voice suddenly rang out. It was a voice that used inner energy to send a message, mocking the hundreds of martial artists. Apart from the literal meaning of his words, there were 2 other messages. Firstly, I'm not here to ambush you. I'm here to confront you head-on. Secondly, Yuan Shi. I can even hear the conversation between you and the people around you. My power, you should consider it yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, they saw the light fog that shrouded everyone's heads rapidly surged into the air, as if it was being sucked up by an invisible force. In an instant, the martial artist's field of vision widened by several times. They soon realized that they were standing in a dangerous gorge surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. Oomph. You don't want to take the road to heaven, but you want to come to hell. After a few breaths, a second voice spoke using inner energy. Since you've come to this broken soul gorge, then you should all stay here. Along with this death announcement, a large number of figures emerged from the mountain paths and stone passes on the 3 sides. There were more than 100 people. These people stood in the shadows of the high ground, watching the crowd in the gorge from afar. They were like a group of evil spirits that had their eyes on their prey, ready to make a move. There are a lot of people coming this time. Yuan Shi saw the situation, but his expression did not change. It's good that they're here. At this point, his right hand moved. Then, a soft sword was pulled out from the belt on his waist and hung down from his hand. I want to see. Yuan Shi used a cold gaze and a murderous tone to shout at the group of ghosts in the high ground. Tonight, in this broken soul gorge, will it be a human or a ghost? Chapter 1042. The mist rose rapidly, and the murderous intent filled the air. In the broken soul gorge, there was a rain of blood. The ghosts in the gorge and the people in the gorge began to fight after a short confrontation. At this time, although the martial artists had suffered more than 100 casualties, there were still nearly 300 of them left. On the other hand, there were only slightly more than 100 exiles in Buried Heart Valley. At first glance, it seemed that the former was more advantageous. However, the number of people was not the most important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. This was because this was a martial arts battle, not a battle between armies. If this was a battle between armies, the factors that determine the outcome of the battle would be the number of people, the formation, the quality of the soldiers, the terrain, and the use of crossbows and firearms. However, in a martial arts battle, these factors were of little value. The sect leaders and disciples of the various sects were not well-trained soldiers. Although in terms of individual combat ability, they were definitely much stronger than ordinary soldiers, but they were divided into dozens of factions, each fighting for themselves. Moreover, they had almost no ability to coordinate with each other. Not to mention people from different sects. Even within the same sect, there might not be many people who could coordinate with each other. To put it simply, each of them had their own trumpet, and each of them had their own tune. On the other hand, although the ghosts under King Yinluo's command were not very cooperative, they had a great advantage in terms of terrain. They were surrounded from top to bottom, and naturally, they could fight with twice the result with half the effort. In addition, their martial arts were top-notch, so it was natural for them to gain the upper hand. Soon, dozens of cannon fodders from the various sects were killed in the encirclement. On the other hand, only a few of the experts from Buried Heart Valley suffered minor injuries. However, as soon as Yuan Shi made his move, the situation changed instantly. Alliance Master Yuan dashed out. With a flick of his wrist, the sword in his hand immediately shot out like a living thing. This sword was a soft sword. To be more precise, it was a cloth sword. Cloth! It was an ordinary cloth. He was an extraordinary person. Before the age of 30, Yuan Shi did not know how to use a sword. In fact, he did not know how to use any kind of weapon at that time. But after the age of 30, his body had the power of profound arts. Once he had this kind of near-perfect inner strength as a foundation, no matter what kind of weapon or move he practiced, it would all be at his fingertips, advancing 1,000 miles in a day. Therefore, Yuan Shi, who was 30 years old, learned many martial arts and gradually became proficient in all 18 types of weapons. There are some martial arts that he could make stronger than someone who had trained for many years just by looking at it once. After the age of 40, Alliance Master Yuan rarely used weapons anymore. The only weapon that was always by his side was this cloth sword that was embedded in his belt. There was a saying, "A sharp sword is unintentional, but a flexible sword is unpredictable." Under the control of Yuan Shi's unfathomable inner energy, the flexible sword was sometimes as fierce as a dragon, sometimes as cunning as a snake, sometimes as vicious as a flood dragon, and sometimes as strong as a python. In the blink of an eye, nearly 10 people had already died under his sword, and every single one of them had been struck in the neck with a single strike. Their heads had been separated from their bodies. Oomph! At this moment, a cold snort was heard, followed by a burly figure. I've heard that Alliance Master Yuan's skills are unparalleled in the world. Now that I've seen you today, you are indeed extraordinary. The person who spoke was a burly man with a curly beard. His figure was like an arhoot, and he held an 8-ringed broadsword in his hand. Listening to his voice, there was no doubt that he was the first person who had shouted using his inner energy not long ago. Great Desert Saber King, Diho! Yuan Shi stared at him and spoke in a deep voice. Oh, Diho smiled. Alliance Master Yuan actually recognizes me? I'm really flattered. Actually, the reason why Yuan Shi recognized Diho was very simple. Because they were of similar age and belonged to the same generation in the Jianghu, they had met several times in the Jianghu. However, at that time, Diho was already the great desert saber king whose name shook the Jianghu, and Yuan Shi was still a nobody. Therefore, the latter remembered the former, and the former didn't even know of the latter's existence. Ha! Ha ha! Yuan Shi heard Diho's words and laughed out loud. Diho didn't know what he was laughing about, and the people who saw this scene didn't know what he was laughing about either. Only Yuan Shi himself knew how ironic and ridiculous the other party's words were. Saber King D. After laughing for a while, Yuan Shi's expression turned cold. I remember, before you escaped to Buried Heart Valley, you were the commander of the Great Desert Eight Saber Association? That's right, I was. When Diho answered this question, he was somewhat puzzled. He didn't understand why Yuan Shi would talk about the past with him at this time. Do you remember how many disciples you had under you? Yuan Shi continued to ask. About 500 to 600. Diho answered casually. Why are you asking this? Can you tell me the names of 20 of them? Yuan Shi asked again. Alliance Master Yuan, what do you mean by this? Diho decided not to answer these strange questions. You can't, Yuan Shi said coldly. But you can say my name. He looked around him. And the names of all the first-rate experts here. Diho was silent. He wanted to hear what Yuan Shi had to say. Everyone in the world is like that. You never remember those mediocre people because all you see is fame, martial arts, looks. Yuan Shi seemed a little agitated when he said this. Your eyes can only see those things so much so that you've neglected people themselves. He paused. That's why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because you're like a bunch of blind people. You're even more blind than a real blind person. Alliance Master Yuan, forgive me for not understanding what you're saying, Diho said as he raised his saber. I'm not here to listen to your deliberately mystifying words. That's true. Yuan Shi closed his eyes. People like you won't understand. He raised the cloth sword in his hand. You're just here to die. If you want to come, then come. Diho had come without him saying anything. The great Desert Saber King lived up to his name. The 8-ring saber in his hand was a unique weapon that had been custom-made by a famous craftsman. The saber weighed more than 40 kilograms. There were 8 rings on the back of the saber, and the blade was like a shark's teeth. In the past, countless famous martial artists had died without a complete corpse under the saber. It was enough to be called a terrifying weapon. As for Diho, he was also a genius of the saber sect. He was born with superhuman strength. At the age of 12, he could wield a 40-kilogram glaive. He also had a high understanding of saber techniques. At a young age, he had mastered all the techniques and formed his own path. At the age of 15, Diho became the youngest saber wielder of the Great Desert Eight Saber Association, similar to the position of a cadre among delinquents. You can imagine the exact rank for yourself. At the age of 28, he became the chief of the 8 sabers. However, at the age of 30, he encountered a bottleneck in his saber technique. Under impatient practice, he went berserk. After that, he began to kill innocent people and sacrificed the blood of experts to his saber. Not long after, he became the public enemy of the martial arts world and was forced to escape to Buried Heart Valley. Almost 20 years had passed. As one of the most experienced escapees in the valley, Diho had naturally broken through his bottleneck. His current martial arts realm was comparable to the 2 masters of the martial arts world, Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagon Spire. Ha! In the blink of an eye, Diho's figure flashed to Yuan Shi's side with a shout. His 8-ringed saber slashed down like a bolt of lightning. His saber was heavy, but it was fast. It was so fast that it was almost invisible to the naked eye. However, Yuan Shi could see it. Not only could he see it very clearly. Too slow, too clumsy. This was Yuan Shi's evaluation of his opponent. It was also the last sentence Diho heard. In the next second, Diho's head left his body, and his saber hit empty air. Indeed, Dio was a first-rate expert. Among the people present, there were probably no more than 10 who could withstand his saber. However, in Yuan Shi's eyes, Diho's saber technique was far from perfect. For the perspective of martial arts realm, Yuan Shi's saber technique was on top of the ultimate move and ultimate transformation. As long as one was still under the ultimate move realm, even if they trained their inner strength to the same level as Yuan Shi, they would at most be able to fight evenly with him. For someone like Diho, whose inner and outer strength were much weaker than his, he could not be considered an opponent at all. Alliance Master Yuan's skills are unparalleled. Everyone, follow Alliance Master and kill. The people from the nearby gangs saw Yuan Shi kill Diho in seconds and took advantage of the opportunity to shout, boosting the morale of the Wulin faction. Yuan Shi did not disappoint his comrades. He immediately displayed a set of superb qigong and flew out like a dragon. Wherever he went, the corpses of the people in the valley would be left behind. Where is he? Yuan Yu's heart was as calm as still water amidst the chaos of battle. As he slaughtered, he pondered, it's impossible for these people to raise the fog. There must be a special person among them. That person's skill is so strong that he can guide the air current. I have to find him from the shadows. While he was thinking, he had already killed dozens of people, which was more than the total number of people killed by the other gangs. After the difference in numbers was widened, the situation of the battle between the two sides was reversed. The Wulin members still had more than 200 people who could fight, while Buried Heart Valley only had about 30 people left. In this way, no matter how advantageous the terrain was, it was useless. The encirclement had evolved into a counter-encirclement. Even if the people in the valley were skilled in martial arts, when one person was surrounded by 5 or 6 people, the result was self-evident. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Death Valley was already littered with corpses. Blood fell like rain and dispersed like fog, taking away the souls of the dead. Just as the ghosts in the valley were about to be wiped out, the person who had raised the fog finally appeared in everyone's sight. I didn't expect. This person's voice attracted everyone's attention as soon as he opened his mouth. To think there's someone with such superb martial arts in the world other than the King of Hell. Although it was the same internal energy transmission, the effect was different depending on the speaker's skills. For example, Diho and Feng Er, who were the second to speak before the battle, had already taken their lunchbox by now. When they used their internal energy to transmit their voices, their pitch was higher and their voices were louder. This way, their chi could carry their words out and let the people in the distance hear them. However, the speaker's tone and voice sounded casual. Among the Wulin members present, Yuan Shi was the only one who could do this. It was obvious that the speaker's internal energy cultivation was very high. Finally, you're willing to show yourself? Yuan Shi raised his head and looked in the direction of the voice. It was on top of a mountain 100 meters away. At this moment, an ordinary-looking old man dressed like a farmer was standing there with his hands behind his back. It wasn't long before some people in the crowd recognized him, and this caused a wave of panic to arise. Mo, it's him. He's not dead yet. The former leader of the demon sect. Du Ying. Yuan Shi knew this name, but he had never seen this person before. 12 years ago, Yuan Shi had seen a leader of the demon sect, but it was not Du Ying. That year, the leader of the demon sect, Lu Xiangru, thought that he had achieved great success in martial arts and was invincible in the world. Therefore, he launched a large-scale attack on all the Wulin sections. As everyone knew, the righteous people in the martial arts world had a habit, and that was, when the situation was unfavorable to them, they would always find a reason to outnumber them and beat them up. As for the reason, everyone was well aware of it, of course. There was no harm in repeating this classic line here. When dealing with these evil people, there was no need to talk about justice in Wulin. In short, that year, the demon sect was wiped out. And the biggest hero in this event, you guessed it right, was Yuan Shi. Lu Xiangru did not know where this guy with the surname Yuan came from. Although Yuan Shi was recognized as a first-class master at that time, he was too unknown in the past, so no one knew the limit of his martial arts. It was not until he single-handedly killed Lu Xiangru that the Wulin sects realized that this person seemed to have been seriously underestimated, and that event became the key factor for Yuan Qi to become the chief of the Wulin Alliance. However, if he were to compare Duing to Lu Xiangru, the difference was like night and day. According to seniority, Duing was Lu Xiangru's uncle, but he was a few years younger than Lu Xiangru. He was only in his early 60s. Lu Xiangru practiced the martial arts until he was 48 years old, but Duing had mastered it when he was 30 years old. After that, even the guardians of the demon sect did not know how powerful his martial arts were. Fortunately, although Duing was a martial arts genius, he did not like to fight. Therefore, when he was the chief of the demon sect had always maintained the style of not offending people if they did not offend them. When he was 43 years old, Duing was tired of the disputes in the sect, so he angrily passed the position of the chief to the ambitious Lu Xiangru. Then he left in a huff, and no one could find him since then. Who would have thought that Duing would actually appear in Heartgrave Valley on this very day? Chief, Jineng recognized this person. He hurried forward, wanting to warn Yuan Qi, but Yuan Qi waved his hand, interrupting Tower Master Ji. A few seconds later, Yuan Qi raised his head and used the same method as Duing to send a message with his internal strength. Duing, I have heard of you. It's great that you are still alive. Chapter 1043. The Kung Fu that Duing practices is a divine Kung Fu passed down by the leader of the demonic sect, Breathless Kung Fu. Chao Xian looked at the battle in the Death Valley from afar and explained to the 4 players beside him. The name of this Kung Fu sounds ordinary, but it is actually a very profound martial art. If one can master this Kung Fu, his inner energy will be like a raging river, endless. The practitioner can move for 3 days and 3 nights with just a breath of Dantian Qi. It sounds a bit like Wudong's Black Tortoise Kung Fu. Feng Buju added. No, it's not even close, Chao Xian denied. Black Tortoise Kung Fu focuses on Kung Fu. It's as subtle as a tortoise, calming the mind and condensing the mind. It's obviously a Taoist Kung Fu. As he spoke, he pointed at Du Ying in the distance. The breathless Kung Fu that Duing practices is a genuine demonic sect Kung Fu. This Kung Fu requires the practitioner to reverse the flow of his meridians and send his mind out. To seize the fortune of heaven and earth, he can use the qi outside his body for his own use. Hearing this, Hua Jian, who was quite familiar with wuxia, asked, reversing the flow of his meridians. Want to be dangerous? Of course it is. Chao Xian smiled. Logically speaking, those who reverse the flow of their meridians will suffer from internal and external damage, suffer from qi deviation, or explode and die. So will drop. Xiaodan widened his eyes and said. Chao Xian did not answer him. Instead, he continued, most of the demonic sect Kung Fu deviates from the orthodox, and many of them go against the traditional Kung Fu. Therefore, the orthodox people consider them as demonic Kung Fu and demonic Kung Fu, and they slander and despise them. He smiled disdainfully. Humph! But in reality, those who can create such demonic Kung Fu are the real prodigies. I agree with that, Feng Buju added. Hearing that, Chao Xian glanced at him. His eyes seemed to say, Master Feng, are you praising yourself? 2 seconds later, Eunuch Chao continued, if a type of martial arts can only make the person who practices it go berserk or explode, then who would still practice it? To put it bluntly, it was still a problem with people. Because the people who created those martial arts were too talented, the martial arts they created could only be practiced by those who were very talented. However, in this world, there are still many people with average talent, especially those so-called righteous people. 8 or 9 out of 10 of them are pedantic and stupid people. They especially like to be complacent. If a martial art like the breathless technique were to fall into their hands, it would naturally be something that would only lead to qi deviation. Then, Ruo Yu asked, what realm has Du Ying's breathless skill reached? Chao Xian picked up the wine pot hanging at his waist and took a sip. he replied. About 30 years ago, Doing reached the 8th level of this kung fu. In terms of chi alone, there was only one person in the world of martial artists who could compare to him. Huh, Xiaotan immediately added. That person must be you, eunuch Xiao. Of course not, Xiao Xian replied. As I said, there is only one person in the world of martial artists who could compare to him. I didn't include the people from the government or the palace masters. Then, Hua Jian asked, who is that person? Is it Yuan Shi? Huh, Xiao Xian laughed. At that time, Yuan Shi was just a small fry. How could he be compared to the leader of the demon sect? He didn't wait for the other to ask. After a slight pause, he said, 30 years ago, in the world of martial artists, the only person who could beat Doing in terms of chi was Yama. Speaking of which, who is this Yama? Feng Bujue followed up with a question. Well, I'll tell you when I meet him. Xiao Xian didn't answer. It seemed that it was not the right time to ask questions. Don't interrupt me. I'm only halfway through. He shook his head and continued. According to legend, there are 10 levels of breathless kung fu, but the 10th level, breathless heaven and earth, is not recorded in writing. Only the first leader of the demon sect, who created this kung fu, mastered it. After he died, only 9 levels of breathless kung fu were passed down. In the years after that, the demon sect did produce some talents, but they all stopped at the 8th level, breathless mountain and mountain. So, over time, they believed that the 8th level was the end of the kung fu. Judging from eunuch Chao's tone, Feng Bujue's expression changed slightly. Doing has probably surpassed that level, hasn't he? Yes, Xiao Xian replied. In the world today, there are 3 people who have mastered the 9th level of breathless kung fu, and Du Ying is one of them. What the? I thought no one would be able to master it for many years. But now, there are 3 people who have mastered it. Xiao Ting gasped in shock. Huh? Feng Bujue laughed. Since eunuch Xiao said in the world today, and not in the martial arts world today, I'm sure. Eunuch Xiao has a place among the 3, right? Master Feng, you're really smart. Xiao Xian praised his brother Bujue, which was a tacit admission. 2 seconds later, he continued unhurriedly. 15 years ago, the demon sect fought with the martial arts world of the Central Plains. The last leader, Lu Xiangru, was killed by Yuan Shi, and almost everyone in the demon sect was killed. Fortunately, some of them managed to survive. Since there was no place for them in the martial arts world, they decided to seek refuge with the imperial court. The breathless kung fu was a gift they gave to the brocade guard. Huh? Shouting couldn't help but interrupt. How did you get something that was given to the brocade guard? Xiao Xian replied. At first, it did fall into the hands of the brocade guard, and Shangguan Si, the commander of the brocade guard, secretly practiced it for a few months. Until one day, when I saw him outside the palace. I vaguely felt that the vital energy in his body was in disorder. When I probed further, I realized that he was on the verge of chi deviation, so I gave him a few pointers. 3 days later, he voluntarily gave me the breathless kung fu and admitted that his talent was limited, so he asked me to kindly accept it. Oh, this Lord Shengwan sure knows how to play, Feng Bujue complained. When he realized that he couldn't practice it anymore, he came to borrow the flower to offer it to the Buddha. He's a smart man, Xiao Xian said. He knows that some things can be kept even if they're useless, but some things have to be sold as soon as possible if they can't bring him any benefits. Otherwise, it'll bring disaster. At this point, Xiao Xian turned his gaze to Yuan Shi. By the way, speaking of smart people, there's another one here. You mean, Alliance Leader Yuan? Hua Jian was the first to react. Yes, Xiao Xian replied. Yuan Shi is a person who deserves everyone's respect. Ho! Feng Bujue's tone changed. He received such an evaluation from eunuch Xiao. Looks like that Yuan Shi must be very talented. Very talented? Xiao Xian laughed. I know, his talent in all aspects is mediocre. But it is because of that, he deserves our respect. Just as the underworld frontline was getting all kinds of information from the NPCs, the situation at the Death Valley changed. After a short standoff, Doing leaped down from the high ground. The people in the valley who were at a disadvantage took this opportunity to escape from the encirclement and retreated to where Du Ying was. After several breaths, Du Ying landed on the ground. The place where he landed did not even raise a speck of dust. This level of celestial cultivation made the leaders of many sects suck in a cold breath. Alliance leader Yuan. After Du Ying landed, he ignored the people around him and only looked at Yuan Qi. I've heard so much about you. Even though Du Ying was dressed like a normal farmer, the presence of an expert on him was even more powerful than before. The presence that came out of his mouth was like a mountain that was as deep as the abyss. The simple sentence that came out of his mouth felt like it weighed a ton. Mr. Du, Yuan Qi did not refer to Du Ying as leader, and he did not call him by his name. Instead, he found a more polite way to address him. Technically speaking, I should call you senior. Even though he said that, Yuan Qi did not act like a junior. He still held the sword in one hand and placed the other behind his back as he spoke. Alliance leader Yuan, you're too kind. Du Ying's voice was cold and powerless. I'm just a mountain village man. You're already flattering me by calling me Mr. Du. Very well then. Yuan Qi did not hesitate to drop the pleasantries. Du Ying, let's cut to the chase. He asked, are you here to stop us? No, Du Ying replied. I'm here to kill you. Humph. Yuan Qi scoffed. There are rules in Buried Heart Valley, Du Ying said. You can only come in if the King of Hell allows you to. If the King of Hell doesn't allow you to come in, you have to leave. If the King of Hell wants you dead at midnight, of course. Yuan Qi cut him off. Now that we're here, we don't plan to leave, and we don't plan to die. I know, Du Ying said. That's why I'm here to send you off. If you think it's possible, then give it a try. Yuan Qi was not afraid of the other party. He put the soft sword back at his waist and said, as I said, it's a blessing for me that you're still alive. I haven't met an opponent like you for many years. He was not afraid of offending people when he said this because the martial artist behind him had long recognized him as the best in the world. Good. At this moment, Du Ying's expression changed. His reserved aura also burst out in an instant, accompanied by a wave of air that swept forward. Yuan Qi stood proudly with his hands behind his back, unmoved. But the people behind him were in trouble. Those at the level of the sect leader were fine. At most, they staggered back a few steps, but they could still stand firm. But those at the level of disciples and some second-rate figures in the martial arts world fell to one knee, their faces pale. Could it be? This is the legendary Haoshiko Haki? Well, it could also be Ryatsu. Seeing this scene, Feng Bujue and Wang Tanji, who were watching from the mountain in the distance, complained one after another. And their behavior, in exchange for nothing more than Li Ruoyu and in Yue Qin's disdainful eyes. Not bad. After seeing this scene, Chao Xian still commented with a calm face. Exerting force from a distance like a tide, this is the biggest difference between the 9th level and the 8th level. If you're at the 8th level, you can only exert force on the front line, he said, and took another sip of wine. But he still can't beat Yuan Qi. Hearing this sentence, except for Feng Bujue, the other 3 people in Hell Frontline and the audience watching the live broadcast were all puzzled. Judging from the scene, Du Ying seemed to be more powerful than Yuan Qi. After all, his internal force could affect the fog, and Yuan Qi only showed speed and strength in the actual combat, which felt that he was not as good as the former leader of the demon sect. Unexpectedly, at the beginning of the battle, Eunuch Chao said such a statement that seemed to be conclusive. Just as he finished speaking, Yuan Qi made his move. In front of Du Ying's huge internal force, speed and skill were useless. So Yuan Qi's movement was not fast, and he did not use the ultimate soft sword. He just used the simplest way, rushing straight to Du Ying and pointing at Du Ying's dantian. Before the fingertip arrived, the power seemed to be infinite. At that moment, Du Ying's face suddenly showed a look of shock. He thought that no one would confront the 9th level of the breathless art head-on, because this kind of behavior was like hitting the sea with a fist. No matter how strong the fist was, it could only break the waves for a while, but the power of the sea was endless, and the fist would soon be submerged. However, Yuan Shi didn't hesitate to choose the most foolish method. This was because he had seen through it with a single glance. The only weakness of the opponent's seemingly flawless cultivation technique was also its strongest point. This is ridiculous. After the shock, Du Ying's heart was filled with anger. A man who did not like to fight, and he was over 60 years old, shouldn't have this kind of emotion. If a normal person was like that, someone like Du Ying should be even more so. But at this moment, Du Ying was angry. When a martial artist found that the level that he had spent his whole life to reach was broken by a junior that he met for the first time, of course, he would be angry. The breathless art was indeed a very powerful martial art, and so was the destiny mysterious art. In the long run, as long as the martial artist practiced the destiny mysterious art for a long time, his internal force would definitely be stronger than the breathless art. But in reality, at least within 30 years, the 9th level of the breathless art would be stronger than the destiny mysterious art. But a stronger martial art did not mean that one would win. Human beings were the key to victory. Du Ying was talented, and his breathless art was stronger than Yuan Shi's mysterious art. But he had not been in a real battle for many years. Even before he left the Jianghu, he had not been in many fights because his enemies would be crushed by his internal force before they could even make a move. On the other hand, Yuan Shi's combat experience was incomparable to anyone else's. When he first entered the Jianghu, even 3 to 5 bandits could have taken his life. Before he was 30, Yuan Shi had been through hundreds of fights of life and death, big and small, because even the weakest of opponents could have killed him. Later on, as his martial arts improved, the opponents he encountered became stronger and stronger. If one had to compare, Yuan Shi was a man who had fought his way from street fights to the world boxing champion. To put it bluntly, in terms of fighting, Du Ying was far inferior to him. Chapter 1044. Yuan Shi made a move, and the energy from his fingertips swirled toward Du Ying. It was true that using a fist to attack a wave could only destroy one point in the wave, but sometimes victory depended on that point. Even though Du Ying had a vast amount of internal energy, he was powerless against the attack and defense of this point, Qi. With a soft whistle, the internal energy of Destiny Star shot out from his fingertips. At the last moment, Du Ying retracted the internal energy of Silent Qi to protect his gate of life. However, the effect of this move was to prevent him from dying on the spot. Du Ying's name had the character Ying in it, but that did not mean he would win. The winner was Yuan Shi. Yuan Shi's talent was average, but he had developed his own fighting style through countless battles. No matter what kind of opponent or skill he encountered, he could see through his opponent's weakness almost instantly. And this was the real treasure that allowed him to stand at the top of the martial world. To be honest, after the first move, Yuan Shi said calmly, "I am very disappointed." Before he finished, the way he looked at Du Ying had changed. It was the way he looked at other people. A person like you, no matter how talented you are, should not practice martial arts, and you should not leave your name in the martial world. He paused, because you lack the most basic fighting spirit that a martial artist should have. Hearing that, Du Ying smiled bitterly. At this moment, his Dantian Qi gate was broken, and his internal energy was in a mess. The seemingly endless internal energy had all dissipated, and he would not be able to use his martial arts for a while. Knowing that he was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, Du Ying was no longer angry. He replied with relief, "You have no choice in the martial world. If I had a choice from the beginning, I would not have stepped into the martial world. Unfortunately, by the time I could choose, I was already the cult master of the demon cult." A choice? Yuan Shi looked at him coldly. "What choice did you make?" "To live in seclusion and leave the martial world," Du Ying replied. "No, that's not right," Yuan Shi denied. "Not right?" Du Ying asked. "Something's not right," Yuan Shi said as he lifted his eyes to look at the 30 people behind Du Ying. "You're no different from these people who were forced to escape into Buried Heart Valley. You think you have abandoned your past by coming here, but it is the exact opposite. It is because of your past that you are trapped here. It doesn't matter if you came here to live in seclusion, flee for your lives, or for any other reason. In the end, you're just deceiving yourselves. At this point, Yuan Shi had already raised his palm, preparing to send Duying on his way. Where there are people, there's a martial world. If you really want to quit, then go to hell and meet the real King Yanluo. With that, he struck out with his palm. Yuan Shi had only used 20% of his strength in this attack. It seemed like he wanted to leave his opponent's corpse intact. Duling had already accepted his fate. He waited silently for this not-so-powerful palm strike to land on his head. However, at this moment, a saber radiance suddenly flashed and struck Yuan Shi's right arm like lightning. At that moment, Yuan Shi's face was filled with shock. What's going on? Alliance Master Yuan thought to himself. Such a powerful saber radiance. It's not from inner energy. As he thought about it, he quickly pulled back his hand and retreated. Then he looked at the sky cautiously. A few seconds later, the people of Buried Heart Valley and the martial world who were standing on both sides were also shocked. They all looked up in the direction where the saber radiance came from. The first thing that appeared in their eyes was white. It was as white as snow. The white robe fluttered in the wind. Then it was red. It was as red as blood. The blood cherry blossoms on the white robe swayed in the wind. After a while, a beautiful figure landed on the ground. At this moment, what everyone saw was still white and red. Her snow-white skin and alluring beauty caused everyone's gaze to be fixated on her. At this moment, everyone present was stunned. Every one of them was very sure that they had never seen this heroine in their lives, because if they had, they would definitely remember her. Therefore, a question appeared in everyone's mind. Who was she? Who are you? Yuan Shi was the first to recover from his shock. It had to be said that Alliance Master Yuan's state of mind was much higher than the other people around him. Even though he was shocked by Su Huaishang's beauty, he would not waver just because of a beautiful woman in front of him. Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang reported her name. Mississippi. Yuan Shi stared at her. I have never seen you before, and I have never heard of your name. He glanced at the saber mark on the ground and continued. I wonder, why did you interfere in the fight between me and Duing? Su Huaishang's answer was concise. We are under the orders of the King of Hell. When she said, I'll wait, Red Cherry's other 3 members, Blood Rose, Hyacinth, and Tai Haitang, descended from the sky one after another and stood on the same side as their captain. To take your lives. After she said the second half of her sentence, Su Huaishang moved. Hong Ying's group of 3 also followed closely behind, instantly attacking. They did not seem to need the help of the people in the valley. With just the 4 of them, they rushed into the enemy formation of more than 200 people. Be careful of the enemy. The next second, Yuan Shi shouted. This was the first time he directly gave an order to the group of heroes in battle, because he knew the 4 opponents in front of him were extremely dangerous. If he didn't say this, the group of people behind him might be killed or injured in an instant. Chi-chi, chi-chi, 2 sabers flashed, and the sound of sabers rang out. Su Huaishang strode forward and set Yuan Shi as her first target without hesitation. Yuan Shi's reaction was lightning fast. He immediately pulled out his sword and swung it to meet his opponent's saber. Su Huaishang's saber was very fast. Because she was a player, her physical fitness had long surpassed the limits of a normal human. Previously, when he was fighting the Desert King of Swords, Diho, Yuan Shi could easily dodge the saber and take down the enemy in one hit. But facing Su Huaishang's attack, Yuan Shi chose to block. Just who is she? After one hit, the confusion in Yuan Shi's heart deepened. Based on her appearance, she is at most in her 20s. But this level of mastery is not something a person her age can achieve. Chi. Before Yuan Shi could settle his thoughts, Su Huaishang's saber slashed at him again. Her saber was too fast. When a person's saber was that fast, her saber was omnipresent and omnipresent. If Yuan Shi was not using a cloth saber, but a fixed saber, he would have been defeated already. Why? The more Yuan Shi fought, the more shocked he became. He had not experienced this feeling of rolling on the tip of a blade for many years already. Why is it that when she uses such powerful qigong and saber skills, there is no trace of internal energy? Actually, the answer to this question was very simple, because the player's control over energy was different from theirs. But as an NPC in the scenario, Yuan Qi could not surpass himself to get this answer. Therefore, Yuan Qi, who could not grasp his opponent's style and could not sense the flow of her qi, could only rely on his five senses to predict her next move. Considering the difference in physical fitness between both parties, it was only natural that Yuan Qi would be at a disadvantage. On the other hand, the battle between the other three members of Red Cherry Blossom had also begun. Their method was barbaric but effective. To put it bluntly, they were shooting at random. Tai Haidang was a player who specialized in marksmanship. The number of guns that she normally carried in her inventory was more than Xiaoling. At this moment, she, Sanguine Rose, and Hyacinth each took out 2 assault rifles. They aimed at the crowd and began to attack. The Jianghu players recognized the guns, but for these guns that were at least several hundred years ahead of their time, even if they were placed before their eyes, they had no idea how to use them. As a result, in less than 10 seconds, 60 to 70 people had died in shock. Seeing the experts from the various sects falling like wheat, even the people from Buried Heart Valley were shocked. From the bloody holes on their bodies, they concluded that these people should have been killed by some kind of hidden weapon. However, they could not see the trajectory of these hidden weapons. They could only hear the sound of them being fired. Sigh, if Xiaoling was here, we would have taken down at least one member of Red Cherry Blossom with our sniper rifle, right? At the edge of the mountain, Hua Jian looked down the horizon and sighed. The other members of Red Cherry Blossom will panic due to their fear of the sniper, Ruoyu added. The surrounding NPCs will be our best aid. Once again, Feng Bujue was attacked by a well-founded argument. He narrowed his eyes and replied, "Are you two done yet? Are you trying to say that I've made a mistake in my strategy?" "Yes," Ruoyu and Hua Jian replied in unison. "Good." Feng Bujue slapped his thigh. "I'll use my actions to prove that it's the same even without the sniper." After saying that, he did not care about the reactions of his teammates and directly jumped into the valley. This is going to be interesting. Although Chao Xian did not understand the term sniper, he could understand the context of the people from Underworld Frontline. Therefore, he basically understood what Feng Bujue was going to do. Bang! Feng Bujue, who was in midair, used his Jeppo and made a loud noise. His action naturally attracted the attention of many people. Of course, these many people were basically people from Buried Heart Valley. The people from Jianghu were all busy at the moment. Basically, 90% of the survivors were covering their heads and running away. Only a few of the more powerful people were using their martial arts to block the bullets. Who is that? I don't know. I've never seen him before. Is he also a reinforcement sent by Yin Wang? Not necessarily. Maybe he's also here to challenge the valley. Is there someone who is so good at Qigong in the martial arts world? They chatted amongst themselves while Brother Ju took one step after another, using Jeppo to charge at them. When Feng Bujue was only 20 meters above the ground, he suddenly twisted his body and kicked out a green glow at the 3 members of Red Cherry Blossom. By then, the members of Red Cherry Blossom naturally noticed his movement. They instantly split up in 3 different directions to avoid the attack of Rankyaku. They turned their guns around and started to fire at Feng Bujue. "Huh, you want to hurt me with normal guns?" Brother Ju, who was floating in the air, did not even try to evade. Not only that, he stood where he was and mocked them. Obviously, he had absolute confidence that he would be unharmed in the rain of bullets. And the source of this confidence was the 2 pieces of equipment that he was wearing. One of them was his belt. _1_B_belt. After the accumulation of many scenarios, this growth-type equipment had started to show its true power when he first got it. The defense of this equipment was slightly weak, but as time passed, with the special effect of every time the equipment was attacked, the defense of this equipment had been nurtured to extremely strong. This was why, in the previous match against Blade, Feng Bujue, who was in the form of a child, survived the shield bash from Long Aomin, who was in the form of an adult. Furthermore, he had a second piece of godly equipment, 1320 mean armor. The special effect of nullifying all long-range attacks below strong, combined with the extremely strong defense and the buffering effect, could be said to be the bane of bullets. With Feng Bujue's current defense, only heavy weapons and special bullets would be effective against technological long-range attacks. TSK, why do they have to come out when we're doing the side quest? Seeing that Brother Ju was immune to normal bullets, Bloody Rose came up with a plan and told her teammates, Hyacinth, Haidang, you guys continue with the quest. I'll hold him back. Before she finished, Bloody Rose had already taken out a feather from her inventory and activated her summoning skill. In the white light, a giant eagle materialized. This unforeseen event caused all the NPCs who were looking over to be stunned on the spot. At this moment, most of them had already categorized these men and women who had suddenly appeared as existences of the path of demons or immortals, and had given up on further speculations. Even though your growth-type summon creature is very powerful, Feng Bujue looked at Bloody Rose on the back of the giant eagle and said, "But if you think you can hold me back with your own power, you are too naive." With a shout, he launched Renkyaku Kick again. This time, Brother Ju used the aerial version of Renkyaku Kick, Chain of Wolves. The swift and fierce attacks crisscrossed as they flew toward the giant eagle that was about to soar into the sky. It seemed like there was no way for it to dodge. Unexpectedly, just as Feng Bujue's attack was about to land, a torrent of vital energy came from the side, and it changed the direction of the slashes from Renkyaku Kick, causing them to deviate from their target. After this change, Bloody Rose's giant eagle successfully soared into the sky and hovered at a higher altitude than Brother Ju. "Whoa, I didn't come to provoke you, but you took the initiative to seek death." Feng Bujue's expression changed, and he turned to look at Du Ying in the distance. "Looks like I'll have to kill you as well." Chapter 1045. Inside the Valley of Lost Souls, the battle was full of twists and turns. Initially, it was the people from the valley who had the upper hand. They had the upper hand in the encirclement. Then, it was Yuan Qi who single-handedly turned the situation around. Then, Du Ying's appearance seemed to have stabilized the situation, but Leader Yuan soon turned the tables around. Just when the people in the valley thought that the battle was over, for beautiful women dressed in blood-red robes suddenly descended from the sky. Using strange hidden weapons, they launched an inhumane massacre on the forces of the martial arts world and successfully suppressed Yuan Qi. In other words, be it the people from the valley or the martial artists, they felt like they had been bungee jumping for the past half an hour. And when Feng Bujue showed up, their emotional journey reached its climax as well. "Leader Yuan, I will deal with Su Huaishang and the one in the sky. I will leave the two on the ground to you." Before Feng Bujue landed, he had already come up with a plan. He did not waste time and shouted an order to Yuan Qi. Yuan Qi had no idea who Feng Bujue was, and he had no idea where the man had come from, but he had seen the few Renkyaku Kicks earlier. At that moment, Leader Yuan thought to himself, "Since this kid is also a master and he is willing to help me, I have no reason to reject him. After all, I am at a disadvantage now, so I might as well let him try." "Okay." 2 seconds later, Yuan Qi replied loudly, "Young hero, you have to be careful." Before he left the battle, he purposely reminded his brother Ju because he really thought Su Huaishang would be a tough opponent. If this young hero was killed instantly, that would be too embarrassing. "Leader Yuan, please do not worry. To deal with her, I have my own way." When Feng Bujue answered him, he even used his leg to launch a flurry of kicks at Du Ying, who was far away. The old man was so shocked that he hurriedly channeled his internal energy and retreated to block the attacks. By the way, I would like to ask Leader Yuan to send a message to the heroes to help them suppress Du Ying and the people from the valley. Brother Ju knew very well that his words might not be effective. The group of martial artists would probably ignore him. Therefore, He had to use Yuan Chi's mouth to give orders. After Yuan Yu heard this, he immediately did some mental calculations and came to the conclusion that this was a good idea. At this moment, Feng Bujue had already leaped into the air. He grabbed a kitchen knife and a military shovel and slashed at Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang swung her twin sabers back and unleashed a series of saber shadows. Not only did she manage to block Brother Ju's attack, she even managed to push Yuan Yu back a few feet. With this exchange, Yuan Chi successfully escaped from the battle. Following that, he immediately followed Feng Bujue's instructions and gave the order to everyone. Without stopping, he charged towards Tai Haidang and Hyacinth. With Yuan Chi's cultivation base, as long as he was prepared, naturally he would not be injured by bullets. He already had a protective barrier around him. This was why Feng Bujue assigned him to deal with Red Cherry and Hyacinth. When Alliance Master Yuan got close, Hyacinth and Tai Haidang had no choice but to change their strategy to deal with this super powerful NPC. This way, the martial artists who were being ravaged by gunfire were able to free up their hands. The martial artists who were still alive were basically elites who were at or near the level of a leader. Asking them to deal with the players might be a bit too much for them, but if they were asked to deal with Duing, who had already lost his Chi Gate, and the 30 or so martial artists from the valley, they would at least be able to fight evenly. Therefore, less than 2 minutes after Feng Bujue arrived at Soul-Breaking Gorge, the battle between the two sides changed again. The war tilted in favor of the forces of power in the world of martial artists once more, and a new round of intense slaughter took place. Where are your teammates? After Su Huaishang exchanged blows with Brother Ju, she immediately asked. Even though she was looking forward to dueling with her brother Ju, this was a team battle. As the leader of Red Cherry, Su Huaishang had the responsibility to consider other factors in the battle to prevent herself from falling into the enemy's trap. Humph! Feng Bujue scoffed. What's wrong? Not seeing anyone makes you even more uneasy, right? He did not give a clear answer. Instead, he used an ambiguous attitude to ask a question in order to create more psychological pressure. Oh well. Su Huaishang's expression hardened. I didn't think you would say anything. After that, Su Huaishang's body moved swiftly. In a flash, she had already used the ultimate skill, Flying Swallow Ride, and leaped into the air. Then, with a twist of her slender waist, she turned around and followed up with Northern Heaven Cross Phoenix. At that moment, the phoenix's cry pierced through the sky. The cold red flame came from several meters away and engulfed Feng Bujue completely. But this kind of combo, I have seen through it a long time ago. Brother Ju commented calmly. At the same time, he leaped into the air and ran against the trajectory of the crossblade. The next second, he was like an octopus sprinting through the water. His head was at the front and his body was at the front. His body remained relaxed, straightened naturally, and even rotated slightly on its own. Feng Bujue used this extremely strange extreme movement to squeeze out from the corner of the crossblade and miss the attack. In this world, there is probably no other person who could use this kind of method to break a combo. Only he, who had zero-time difference calculation and strange thinking, could come up with this idea and execute it. Ha ha! After successfully breaking the combo, Brother Ju rushed to Su Huaishang's side. He laughed arrogantly. The crossblade is so hard to dodge. It's so embarrassing to counterattack like this. Ping! Quang! After a few seconds, 2 sounds of metal clashing could be heard. The first sound was the sound of Su Huaishang using her left blade to block the blade of Mustbreak. The second sound was the sound of Su Huaishang using her right blade to block the WJQ 308 military shovel. Oh, that is rather surprising. Half a second later, Feng Bujue, who had failed to counterattack, said darkly with a chilling expression, I made my move right before you finished your skill, and you managed to defend yourself in time? Huh, you're quite good at acting. Su Huaishang's eyes flashed with anger. She replied harshly, Didn't you see through our combo a long time ago? Just as she finished speaking, a giant shadow rushed down from the sky. That shadow was no doubt the giant eagle that the Blood Rose rode on. And this attack was one of the summoned creature's skills, Silent Assault. As the name suggested, the specialty of this skill was that it would not make any noise when it was activated. It would not even cause any vibration or wind pressure in the air. Normally, the target would only notice the attack when the giant eagle was extremely close to them. In actual combat, as long as the Blood Rose cooperated with her teammates, she could often use this skill to take down the enemy in one hit. Of course, Feng Bujue would not be taken away by the Blood Rose. Just as he said earlier, he had seen through this combo a long time ago. Before Su Huaishang's Northern Heaven Cross Phoenix was activated, Brother Ju had already noticed his opponent's intention. This was because he had been paying attention to the Blood Rose's movements in the air. After he escaped from the gap between the slashes, Feng Bujue purposely used his expression and words to mislead his opponent. He wanted to create the illusion that he had been careless. However, Goddess Su was not as simple as she seemed. Based on her experience of fighting with Brother Ju many times, she was careful when she used the slashes. She did not use her full strength. The result was as expected. Her opponent used a very extreme method to pass through the slashes and found a chance to counterattack. This was when Su Huaishang showed her mercy. She did not use her full strength, so she was able to react before her opponent's attack arrived. Unfortunately, the moment she blocked Feng Bujue's slashes and slashes, Su Huaishang realized her opponent did not reveal any flaws. For an expert of Su Huaishang's level, the feeling of being hit by a weapon could give her a lot of information. Therefore, after blocking Feng Bujue's 2 slashes, she understood. The purpose of these 2 slashes was not to kill her, but to push her back. In other words, Feng Bujue's series of actions were all done after he saw through his opponent's coordination. Every step that he took looked dangerous, but in reality, it was done with ease. Regardless of whether he was using this method to test his opponent's bottom line or to toy with his opponent, this was not a very pleasant combat experience for Su Huaishang. Not bad. Feng Bujue rebounded back 1 feet and barely dodged the giant eagle's attack. No matter how I baited you, you did not reveal any flaws. As he spoke, the giant eagle had already rushed into the ground. Like a ghost that could pass through walls, it silently disappeared into the soil. Summoned creatures could pass through walls, but the Bloody Rose could not. Therefore, when the Silent Assault was activated, she had already left the giant eagle's back. At this moment, the Bloody Rose was still in the sky. However, she was no longer riding on the giant eagle, but the one in the sky has also summoned the fossilized pterosaur. Is he planning to turn around and attack those NPCs? Feng Bujue said as he looked up at the dragon circling in the sky. Speaking of which, you guys are doing a side quest, right? What's the quest about? Purging the invaders for Hades? Su Huaishang did not answer Feng Bujue's question. In these few seconds, she was using her title skill, Bullet Vision, to observe the situation on the battlefield. Even though it was only a few seconds, it was enough for her to see every detail on the battlefield clearly. Rose. After Brother Ju finished, Su Huaishang immediately shouted at her teammates in the sky, cover Hyacinth and Haidang. Retreat. This was the leader's order, so there was no doubt about it. Regardless of whether the decision was right or wrong, as professional players, Red Cherry's players would not question or argue during the competition. What they needed to do was to execute the order perfectly. If there were any questions, they would have to wait until the competition was over. Therefore, the next second, the Bloody Rose controlled the fossilized pterosaur to charge at Yuan Shi. The giant eagle that had burrowed into the ground not long ago also flew up and suddenly appeared between Yuan Shi and Red Cherry's players. Xiong. Before Yuan Shi could regain his footing, 2 balls of fire came at him from the sky. Thankfully, Guild Master Yuan's Qinggong was impeccable. He used his movement skill to evade the invisible pillars of fire and dodge to the side. However, Hyacinth and Tai Haitang used this opportunity to jump onto the giant eagle's back and soar into the sky with it. What's wrong? Seeing this, Feng Bujue knew that the other party had decided to retreat. It was not realistic for him to chase after 4 people at the same time. Therefore, he decided not to attack. Instead, he looked at Su Huaishang and said, "Aren't you looking forward to fighting me? Are you leaving already?" "We're here to complete the side quest." Su Huaishang replied, "Since we can't do it anymore, then we should retreat as soon as possible to prevent further losses." She paused for a moment. Her beautiful face turned to look at the sky. "Your teammates are on a mountain over there, aren't they?" "So you found them." Feng Bujua knew the effect of bullet vision, so he did not deny it. "Actually, I couldn't see them clearly. The distance was too far for me." Su Huaishang smiled. "But after hearing your confirmation, I'm relieved. Looks like my decision was not wrong." "Huh?" Feng Bujua was shocked. You tricked me?" There's a subtext behind his words that he didn't say out loud, which was, "And it worked." "Huh?" Su Huaishang's smile became even more adorable. However, she did not answer Brother Ju's question directly. Instead, she said, "This battle between you and me has been waiting for too long. I'm not in a hurry. If you want to fight, you can come to Heartbreak Villa to fight." Then, Su Huaishang sheathed her sword and leaped into the air. With her ultimate skill, Flying Swallow, she easily swam up the wall and jumped out of the valley. Before her shadow disappeared into the mountain, she turned back to look at Brother Ju with a deep gaze. At that moment, her clothes fluttered in the wind while her beautiful hair fluttered with the wind. When looked at from afar, she seemed like an otherworldly celestial maiden that possessed a valiant and heroic bearing. Even the NPCs were mesmerized by her beauty. "What are you looking at?" 3 seconds later, Feng Bujua roared. "What are you all doing here?" This time, he did not wait for Yuan Qi to speak. Instead, he used the tone of a leader to yell at the group of martial artists, "Kill! Cleanse the ground!" His yell snapped many people out of their daze. Even though they still had no idea who this person was, they had to admit he had a point. 5 minutes later, the battle at Heartbreak Valley was over. The group of martial artists led by Yuan Qi had suffered almost 200 casualties. Currently, there were 48 survivors. 13 of them had minor injuries. The group from Heartbreak Valley was completely wiped out. Only one person survived, without a doubt. That person was Doing. This old man was a playful one. When he heard Su Huaishang say the word retreat, he ran away faster than the members of Red Cherry. Other than Yuan Qi, the other martial arts masters could not stop him. However, Du Ying's mental state was like that of a stray dog. Right now, he was running towards Heartbreak Mountain Villa in a daze. He had many questions in his mind. He wanted to ask the King of Hell. On the other hand, after the dust had settled, Yuan Qi finally arrived in front of Feng Bujue. He bowed politely and said, "On behalf of all the heroes, I, Yuan Qi, thank you for your help." His gaze landed on Brother Ju. "May I know your name and which faction you are from?" Chapter 1046. When the other 3 people from the Hell front line arrived at the Broken Soul Valley, Feng Bujue had just finished his recital of more than 1,000 words. The expressions of Alliance Master Yuan and the other Wulin heroes perfectly expressed the extreme shock in their hearts and the intense pain in their bodies. However, Brother Ju didn't care about it. He raised his hand and gestured to his teammates, saying, "By the way, I haven't introduced them yet. These 3 are the guests of Broken Sword Shahitsu." He pointed at Ruo Yu and said, "This is my wife, and the other 2 are my disciples." "Alliance Master, do you want to know their names?" "No." Yuan Qi widened his eyes and said loudly, "There's really no need." Alliance Master Yuan's expression seemed to be saying, "Please don't say any more. I'll kneel to you." Jineng, the head of the Octagonal Tavern, also stepped forward and said, "Master Feng, the reputation of your sex heroes. I think it's better to listen to them next time. We have more important things to do right now." "That's right." Yuan Qi quickly added, "The terrain here isn't good. We can't stay here for long." He spoke loudly like a Wulin Alliance Master. He didn't need to use his inner energy to transmit his voice because there were less than 50 people around, and they all had good hearing. So he could just use his voice to speak I think the heroes should be resting by now. They weren't idle when Feng Bujue was talking nonsense. We should continue our journey as soon as possible. Once we're done, we'll come back and bury the bodies of our comrades. Yes, yes, yes. Alliance Master Yuan is right. Indeed, we can't wait any longer. Yes, everyone, let's hurry up and get going. The martial artists who were lucky enough to survive quickly responded. To prevent Feng Bujue from coming up with another 3 paragraphs of storytelling, they did not hold back. As a result, the remaining 50 or so people continued on their journey. On the other hand, in front of Heartbreak Mountain Villa, under the shroud of light and mist, a group of people majestically marched to the entrance of the villa. At this moment, there was not a single person left in the village outside the villa. It was obvious that the ambush at the Broken Soul Gorge was an operation where all the residents of Buried Heart Valley were mobilized. Unfortunately, only one person survived. Of course, even if this group of people were still alive, they wouldn't stop these imperial troops, because King Yin Luo had already ordered to invite this group of people in. This was also why the group of martial artists led by Yuan Shi did not find a single soldier's corpse along the way. In fact, not only did they not find any corpses, they also did not find any traces of a fight. Even horse hooves, carriage tracks, and footprints were not found. There was no doubt that not long after the Imperial Court's troops entered the valley, they took a different path from the martial artists, and the people in the valley had very thoughtfully removed their tracks. Sirs, please wait. When the riders at the front of the group arrived at the gate of the villa, an old woman blocked their way. She was an old woman who looked to be in her 60s. Her body was thin, and her face was full of wrinkles. She wore simple farmer's clothing with patches on her clothes. Seeing this, a sturdy man wearing battle armor stepped out from among the 3 leading riders and said, "Auntie, are you from this villa?" This man's name was Lu Yuan, and he was a general in the Governor General's office. This office had been abolished long ago in the official history. Lu Yuan had a rough appearance, and his personality was similar. Seeing how he addressed the old woman as Auntie, one could tell that this lord was not particular about etiquette and was very close to the people. "Yes," the old woman replied. "I'm here on King Yinluo's order to wait for your arrival." Although she was old, she spoke quickly, and her voice was full of energy. Animals are not allowed to walk in Buried Heart Villa. She looked at the horses that the riders were riding and the horses that were pulling the carriages and continued, "Please get off the carriages and follow me on foot." Huh? Hearing this, the second rider's face showed a trace of displeasure. This person's name was Bao Qi, and he was an official in the Imperial Secret Service. Although his name had the word strange in it, his appearance was nothing special. The Secret Service loved to recruit this kind of people. Furthermore, his bureaucratic style was the most obvious among the 3 leaders. "Annie, how can you speak like that?" Bao Qi said. "Do you know that the person in the carriage is He?" At this time, the third rider waved his hand and interrupted Bao Qi's words. "Brother Bao, as the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Let me go and report to that man first, and then we can make a fuss about it." This man, who had a feminine tone and a slightly chubby face, was naturally a eunuch from the East Faction Guards. His name was Mao Jinkai, and from his name, one could tell that he came from a poor family and was sent to the palace when he was very young. "Yes, Brother Bao," Lu Yuan on the other side added. "Why do we have to make things difficult for an old man? Let's listen to His Highness first." Fine." Bao Qi saw that eunuch Mao had already turned his horse around and went back, so he snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. Not long after, eunuch Mao came back, and he walked back. "Both of you, His Highness has an order. Let's all go together." Eunuch Mao smiled and said to the 2 people on the horse. Hearing this, Lu Yuan and Bao Qi both turned around to take a look. They discovered that the few important figures in the carriage had also alighted from it. Thus, they hurriedly dismounted and prepared to lead the troops into the manor. Unexpectedly, the old woman once again raised her hand to block their path. "What now?" Bao Qi was a little impatient this time. "The King of Hell has ordered that the number of people entering the manor is at most 10. The old woman replied word by word. What? Bao Qi shouted. How dare you? You! Just as he was about to use his authority to scare this old woman who didn't know what was good for her, another person's voice sounded from behind. General Bao, why are you so angry? If it's 10 people, then it's 10 people. Hearing this voice, Bao Qi immediately cowered. Not only did he cower, but he also turned around and knelt. Not only did he kneel, but most of the people in the group also knelt. Obviously, the person who spoke was a member of the royal family, Prince Jin Zhu Zhizhou. Perhaps some people would think that this guy's name was very strange. That's right, it was very strange. However, for the princes of the Ming dynasty, naming had always been something that they couldn't control. According to the rules of the ancestors, the princes' families had to be arranged according to the characters. Using the Prince of Jin as an example, there were a total of 20 characters, save beauty, Zhong Qiao, know new things, be cautious, seek for wisdom, examine the heart, salty, admire the scenery, record learning, continue cultivation. Similarly, according to the rules of the ancestors, Zhu Yuanzhang was inexplicably stubborn in this aspect. The descendants of the Zhu family had to have the 3 characters in their names, and they had to be arranged according to metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. However, the characters were limited, but the descendants were endless. Therefore, at the end of the Ming dynasty, we were lucky enough to see the emperor named Zhu Yulang. This is really not bad. Some of the descendants of the princes who lived a miserable life had to create their own characters and names in the later years. If you see a character with the 5 elements in the dictionary with unknown meanings, it was most likely created in the Ming dynasty. Okay, let's get back to the story. Your Highness. 2 seconds later, Bao Qi knelt down and said, Your Highness, your body is priceless, and you only brought 10 people into this dangerous place. If something happens, okay, get up. Let's talk first. Zhu Zhizhou said in a very easygoing tone, Save it. I'm not priceless. When he said this, there was a bit of a bitter smile on his face. It seemed that he wanted to say something self-deprecating, but he didn't say it out loud. After a pause, he continued, Besides, 10 people are enough. Besides me and Master Chong, there are 8 of you peerless masters protecting us. What's there to worry about? The Mr. Chong that Zhu Zhizhou mentioned was called Chong Wei. Okay, I know what you're thinking right now, but please give up on that thought. Yes, this master was called Chong Wei, but he was not the Chong Wei who claimed that he did not know martial arts. He was a white-haired imperial physician in his 60s. As for the other 8 great experts, there were naturally Lu Yuan, Bao Qi, and Mao Jinkai. However, they could only be considered the weakest of the 4 heavenly kings. Oh no, the weakest of the 8 great experts. As for the remaining 5 masters, we have to talk about them separately. The first one was the commander of the Imperial Secret Service, Shang Wansi. He was a shrewd man, and Chao Xian thought that he was a smart man. Throughout the journey, he was riding at the back of the group, and he was wearing an ordinary Imperial Secret Service uniform. At first glance, no one would think that he was one of the most powerful people in the group. As for his martial arts, Shang Wansi, who was in his early 50s, had already reached the level of invincible Vajra 10 years ago. It was a pity that his martial art style was too rigid and orthodox, so he could not understand the breathless skill. Otherwise, his cultivation level would be higher. Then, there was the second master. His name was Bianji, and he was the vice commander of the governor's office. He gave people the impression that he was just an armchair strategist, but in reality, his internal energy was among the top 3 masters in the palace, and he was not inferior to Doing. Incidentally, before Chao Xian left the caravan, Bianji and Chao Xian sat in the same carriage, while the other 2 carriages were for Zhu Zhizhou and Sun Takashi. Next, we can talk about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th masters in one breath. Jiang Su, Chao Gua, and Yu Fei were the 3 people who rode beside the 3 carriages. As mentioned in the previous chapter, they were responsible for the protection of several high-ranking officials and dignitaries in the convoy. The 3 of them were first-rate masters selected from the upper 12 guards for this operation, and they were all hereditary death warriors of the royal family. They would not hesitate to die for Zhu Zhizhou at critical moments. These were the 8 masters mentioned by Zhu Zhizhou, including him and imperial physician Chang. There were exactly 10 of them. Other than eunuch Xiao, who had left the group to solo, the rest of the people in the group were basically small fries. Of course, minions was a relative term. Strictly speaking, this entire troop of soldiers and horses were all trained in martial arts. Moreover, they were a regular army. If they really fought, their combat power would definitely not lose to the several hundred people of the martial arts world. This, Bao Qi thought for a moment. Since your highness has said so, all right, Bao Qi, you can follow that woman and lead the way. Shang Guanxi's intervention put an end to the argument. After receiving instructions from his superior, Bao Qi did not have much to say. Yes, your highness. He nodded, then turned to the old woman and said, Then, I will have to trouble you to lead the way. Please come in first. The old woman stepped aside and raised her hand to make a please gesture. Then, Zhu Zhizhou, Chang Wei, Shang Guanxi, Bianji, Lu Yuan, Bao Qi, Mao Jinkai, Jiang Su, Chao Gua, and Yu Fei stepped through the door of Heartbreak Mountain Villa. The rest of you, please wait outside the villa. After the 10 people came in, the old woman said something to the guards outside, and then raised her hands. In the next second, the thick door of the villa was pushed by an invisible force, and it suddenly closed. Seeing this, 6 of the 8 people's expressions changed. Only Shang Guanxi and Bianji remained calm. They were not surprised by this scene. After closing the door, the old woman turned around and walked in front of the group. Then, she said, Everyone, please follow me. After saying that, she walked back into the manor without looking back. The 10 people followed obediently and did not say anything. Soon, they followed the old woman through an elegant courtyard and arrived in front of a big house. The style of the house was very strange. On the side of the house, facing the courtyard, was a porch. The door on the porch did not have a handle, and it looked like a wooden fence. There were pieces of white paper pasted on the gaps. People like us could easily tell that this was a traditional sliding door. However, it was the first time that the 10 people who had just entered Heartbreak Mountain Villa had seen such a door. Master, I've brought them here. The old woman stood in front of the porch and bowed her head. You may leave. A reply came from the other side of the door. Just this reply alone was enough to make the 10 people outside the door think. This was because the voice that came from the other side of the door was like an oriole flying out of a valley. It was the voice of a young girl. Yes, the old woman replied, then slowly retreated and disappeared into the distance. After a few breaths, the sliding door on the porch opened on its own without anyone touching it. Behind the door, there was a wide couch. The couch was covered with a pink gauze curtain. Within the curtains, one could faintly see a figure lying on his side. Although the King of Hell had yet to truly appear in front of these people, just her seductive body, curves, and voice. It was enough to make the men outside the door feel restless and restless. After a light laugh, Zhu Zhizhou was the first to step forward. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. For this young prince, how could the graceful figure in front of him be associated with the word danger? Mississippi. Zhu Zhizhou bowed and said, Are you the King of Hell? Chapter 10:47. Yama did not respond to the question. She was silent for 2 seconds before she asked, Young master, are you Zhu Zhizhou? How dare you? Hearing this, Bao Qi immediately stepped forward and shouted, How dare you? How dare you call his highness by his name? Whoosh! Before he could finish a sentence, a sharp sound came from the tent. An invisible force came out of the tent and headed straight for Bao Qi. The King Yanluo of Hell's attack appeared to be completely powerless. In fact, it appeared to be nothing more than a gentle breeze blowing through the veil. However, in the blink of an eye, the force of the attack accelerated rapidly and condensed into an unstoppable thunderbolt in the air. No one knew what kind of method she used, what kind of move, what kind of cultivation technique she used. In fact, among the 8 great masters, only 2 of them were able to react in time to this move. The first one was BNG. Deputy spokesperson BNG's internal energy was top-notch. He instinctively sensed the danger of this attack. Thus, he hurriedly activated his true power, raised his palm, and drew out a vigorous palm image in the air, wanting to meet the attack head-on. The second one was Shangguan-Si. As the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, he could not sit by and watch his subordinates get killed. Unlike BNG, Shangguan-Si was an expert in external energy. He mainly relied on his five senses. This was very similar to the players. In the blink of an eye, Shangguan-Si's figure flickered, and he raised his arm to block Bao Qi's attack. However, what happened next could only be described as terrifying. Chi, poo, bang. After three strange sounds, BNG's shadow of a palm was pierced through and disappeared. Shangguan-Si's arm was also pierced through and blood flowed out. As for Bao Qi, his entire upper body was smashed into a pile of minced meat. He did not even have the chance to make a sound before he died. Under such circumstances, the 7 great masters who were still alive had the same reaction. What the F***? As for Zhu Zhizhou and Tsun Takashi, who did not know martial arts, although they did not understand the various techniques involved in this round of confrontation, they still clearly saw the miserable state of the corpses. Therefore, they were so shocked that their faces were pale, and they did not know what to do. Good. The two of you are indeed experts of the inner palace. 2 seconds later, the King of Hell's pleasant voice rang out again. With Deputy Bien's aptitude, it's not easy for you to cultivate the ability to transform your vital qi. Lord Shangguan's external kung fu is also fierce and extraordinary, which is very rare. If the two of you go to Jianghu, you'll definitely become one of the top figures in the martial arts world. Her tone was very calm when she said these words, but the calmer she was, the more terrifying she seemed. It was so terrifying that it was suffocating. In today's world, there is only one person who could give these 7 experts such a sense of oppression, and that was Chao Qin. Senior. 5 seconds later, Shangguan-Si used the acupoint sealing technique to stop the bleeding on his hand and said in a deep voice, "My subordinate offended you with his words just now. Please forgive him." He was indeed a smart man who knew how to size up the situation. To him, Bao Qi's death was completely acceptable. If there was a need, he would even sell Zhu Zhizhou for it. Yama pondered for a moment before continuing. "Do you know how to talk to me now?" I'm BNG. Greetings, Senior." Perhaps no one would have thought that Deputy Bien, who usually looked a little cold, would be the second person to bow down after Shangguan-Si. However, his actions set a good example. When the rest of the people saw Lord Shangguan and Lord Bien's attitude, they didn't feel embarrassed anymore. Thus, Lu Yuan, Mao Jinkai, Jiang Su, Chao Gua, and Yu Fei cupped their fists and respectfully reported their names to the King of Hell. Then, it was Imperial Physician Chang's turn. "I'm Chong Wei." "Greetings, Mr. Chong. There's no need to call me Senior." Unexpectedly, the King of Hell interrupted Chong Wei while he was speaking. "I can't afford to be called Senior." This didn't sound wrong at first, because Imperial Physician Chong was the oldest among the 10 people, although there were only 9 left. However, after thinking about it carefully, something didn't seem right. Judging from the conversation just now, the King of Hell was quite rude to this group of people. Even when BNG, who was the second oldest among the 10 people, called her Senior, she didn't say anything. Logically speaking, even if she wanted to reject Imperial Physician Chong calling her Senior, she only needed to say the first half of the sentence. The second half of the sentence, "I can't afford to be called Senior," didn't seem right. Thus, the moment these words left his mouth, everyone who had gradually regained their senses turned to look at Imperial Physician Chong, their faces filled with suspicion. Even if I can't hide it from your eyes, why did you have to point it out?" In the next second, Tsun Takashi's old aura seemed to have disappeared. His slightly hunched back suddenly straightened up, and his complexion seemed to have become 10 years younger. Even the tone of his voice was no longer that of an old man. Instead, it revealed the spirit of a middle-aged man. "Lord Chong, you." Zhu Zhizhou, who was standing next to Chang Wei, was the last one to come to his senses. He was also the one who was most surprised by Imperial Physician Chang's change. "Ha! Your Highness, to be honest," soon Takashi sneered. "Many years ago, I wasn't an Imperial Physician." As he spoke, he put his hands behind his back and assumed the posture of a peerless master. As soon as he said that, the expressions of the 7 experts changed, especially the 2 from the Imperial bodyguards and the Eastern Palace. To them, it was a huge dereliction of duty that there was such a person among the Imperial physicians. Moreover, they didn't even notice it. It's normal that you can't find out his identity. At this moment, the King of Hell seemed to have seen through their thoughts. He said coldly in the room, "This person is the #1 expert in Japan 40 years ago, Chang Xingtai. Not only is he at the peak of martial arts, but he's also proficient in medicine and astrology. He can be said to be an all-rounder." She paused for a moment. However, about 30 years ago, Chang Xingtai suddenly disappeared from the Japanese martial arts world. Some people said that he's dead, while others said that he went out to sea to seek immortality. However, in reality, he disguised himself and sneaked onto the Japanese pirate ship to come to the Central Plains. Chang Wei laughed coldly when he heard that. "I didn't expect that there would be someone who knows so much about me in this deep valley at the edge of the desert." He waved his sleeves and asked rudely, "I wonder, how did you find out about all this?" "It's simple," the King of Hell replied. "Of course, someone told me." "Who?" Chang Wei's expression turned fierce as he looked at the curtain with a sharp gaze. "It's me." Another voice answered him. It was a gentle and calm voice. The moment this voice was heard, everyone's expression changed, including the King of Hell. As soon as the voice was heard, Chao Qin's figure appeared between Zhu Zhizhou and Chang Wei. Nobody saw how he appeared. It was as though he had been standing there all along. "Chao, excellent." Soon Takashi's expression turned serious, and his hand unconsciously moved closer to his chest. "What? Are you trying to create a smokescreen?" Chao Qin did not even look at him. He said casually, "Oh no, it should be called ninjutsu. That makes it sound more powerful." Upon hearing that, Chang Wei lowered his hand. "You know about ninjutsu as well?" "I know a lot," Chao Qin replied. "The day you entered the Imperial Academy of Medicine, I knew you weren't an ordinary person." He continued, "After that, you hid as an Imperial physician for more than 20 years. During such a long time, I naturally had plenty of time to investigate your background." "Oof, you're just bluffing," Chang Wei said. "If you really knew about my identity when I entered the Imperial Academy of Medicine, why didn't you expose me?" "Why should I expose you?" Chao Qin asked without even thinking about it. "Of course it's because..." Chang Wei wanted to say something, but the words froze in his mouth. Then, his expression became rather unsightly. "Do you understand now?" Chao Qin replied, "Since you can hide for more than 20 years, I can hide for more than 20 years with you. The moment you show your foxtail, I'll take you down." He smiled as he picked up the wine pot and took another sip. "Catching you on the first day of your infiltration isn't really a punishment, because you're already prepared to die. So I won't let you die. I'll just quietly watch you pretend. I'll watch you waste half of your life on something that's impossible to succeed. In the end, when you think you're about to succeed, I'll let you know that it's all in vain." Every word he said was like a cold wind, brushing against Chang Wei's soul. This is the best way to deal with people like you. It was not just Chang Wei. Even the people from the imperial court beside him felt a chill run down their spines when they heard that. At that moment, they felt extremely lucky. Thank goodness we're on the same side as Eunuch Chow. However, there was a hint of fear in their hearts. What if he has something on me, but he didn't expose me? What should we do then? You. On the other hand, the person involved, Chang Wei, was furious. His inner strength and killing intent involuntarily spread out from his body. However, Chao Qin was not moved at all. He stood in front of Zhu Zhizhou and said, "When you were 40 years old, you were already a legend in the Japanese martial arts world. Like many tyrants, when you obtained power that others couldn't reach, the first thing you thought of was how to protect it forever. So, you came to the Central Plains. He paused. You're very smart. You know that the Great Ming Dynasty is vast and has many experts. Even if you're invincible in Japan, it doesn't mean that no one in the Central Plains can defeat you. Therefore, you hid your identity and disguised yourself as a wandering doctor. On the surface, you were traveling around the world and practicing medicine to help the people, but in reality, you were looking for information about the art of immortality. At this point, Eunuch Chao glanced at the King of Hell. However, at that time, the legend of the King of Hell didn't exist yet. After you failed to find anything in the martial arts world, you thought of the imperial family. He chuckled. That's not wrong. If there really is an art of immortality in this world, then the emperor of the Great Ming Empire would definitely do everything he could to obtain it. Even if he couldn't obtain the real thing immediately, he would at least be able to obtain information about it. Therefore, after a few years of tossing and turning, you finally made an exception and entered the Imperial Academy of Medicine with your superb medical skills. At this point, you felt that your plan was halfway to success. He spread out his hands and shook his head. I didn't expect that you would wait for nearly 30 years. Now that you're almost 70 years old, you can't wait any longer. Coincidentally, this time, the emperor sent someone to look for the art of immortality in Buried Heart Valley and appointed you as the only imperial physician accompanying them. I'm sure you'll be overjoyed when you hear this news, right? When Tsun Takashi heard this, he stared intently at Chao Qin and replied, Fine, you know everything, but so what? As he spoke, he took out 8 shurikens from his arms and held them between his 10 fingers. I'm now in Buried Heart Valley and standing in front of the King of Hell. As long as I kill all of you and subdue that woman, the art of immortality will still be mine. Ha ha! Chao Qin looked at Tsun Takashi and laughed a few times. Tsun Takashi, you really don't understand. You said it yourself. I know everything. Do you think at this moment, you and everyone else here, I didn't expect that I wouldn't be able to predict that you and everyone else here would be standing here alive? Cold. This sentence made everyone except the King of Hell feel a bone-chilling coldness. There are so many imperial physicians in the Imperial Academy of Medicine. Why do you think the Emperor chose an old fart like you to come with us? Chao Qin used another obvious question to stab Tsun Takashi in the back. At this point, Tsun Takashi had nothing else to say. A second later, he roared and made his move. The 8 shurikens danced like bees and butterflies. It was as though each of them had their own consciousness. They circled around Chao Qin and swarmed towards Zhu Zhizhou. Tsun Takashi was proud and arrogant, and he thought that he was invincible. Even the King of Hell's actions didn't surprise him. He was only pretending to have the same reaction as Zhu Zhizhou. He didn't even care about the 7 experts around him. However, Tsun Takashi was still somewhat fearful of Chao Qin. He knew that he didn't stand a chance against this unfathomable monster. Therefore, he chose to attack Zhu Zhizhou in an attempt to make Chao Qin reveal his weakness. If he killed Eunuch Chao, the others wouldn't even have the guts to fight him. However, what Tsun Takashi didn't expect was Chao Qin didn't move. He just stood there indifferently. He didn't even look back as he allowed Zhu Zhizhou to die under his shurikens. What? Tsun Takashi was shocked once again. Since Chao Qin didn't move at all, he naturally didn't reveal any weakness. Therefore, he didn't know where to start his follow-up attack. What's wrong? Chao Qin picked up the wine pot and took a sip. Are you thinking that I'm standing between you and His Highness to protect him? He smiled faintly and shook his head. Sigh, you deserve to die without a complete corpse. Before he could even say the word corpse, 7 different techniques and inner energy had already landed on Tsun Takashi's back like a torrential storm. Chapter 1048. It was the darkest moment before dawn. Even the fog in Heartgrave Valley had dimmed a little. After a night of fighting, countless people had been buried in the valley forever. However, Dewing was still alive. He had escaped from the soul-breaking gorge and came to the gate of Heartgrave Mountain Villa. However, what awaited him here was a scene of blood flowing like a river. At this moment, the gate of Heartgrave Mountain Villa was wide open. From the door sill to the gate, and then to the courtyard of the villa, as far as the eye could see, there were corpses. Most of the corpses were fully armed soldiers of the imperial court. Some of them were dressed like servants, and some were wearing flying suits. However, the most eye-catching ones were the corpses of a few old women. Dewing knew very well that these old women who served the King of Hell were all experts. They had served the King of Hell for many years, and they had received more guidance than anyone else in the valley. Even the weakest of them could defeat the leaders of the top sects in the martial arts world. However, it was precisely this group of people who had died here with the soldiers. What's going on? Du Ying's worldview had been refreshed several times in the past few hours. Compared to the shock brought to him by Yuan Shi, Red Cherry, and Feng Bujua, his reaction to this scene was a little dull. Oh, there's still one alive here. Suddenly, a soft and feminine voice came into Du Ying's ears. When Du Ying heard this, he felt the blood in his body go cold, because the voice came from just a few inches behind him. Who is it? Du Ying turned around like a frightened bird. Then he saw Chao Qin. Oh, it's Du Ying. Unit Chao looked at his face and said, You've escaped from the soul-breaking gorge, haven't you? Who are you? Du Ying couldn't help but take a step back. He didn't know why, but he felt an instinctive fear. Did you kill all these people? I am Chao Qin. Chao Qin put his hands behind his back and said calmly, These people, I killed some of them, but I didn't. What would happen here? Du Ying asked hesitantly. At the same time, he had already secretly circulated his true essence to prevent the other party from doing anything that would be disadvantageous to him. Is it really necessary for a person who is about to die to know so much? Chao Xian asked coldly. Even if I'm going to die. Du Ying tried his best to control his breathing and replied darkly, It is always good to die knowing the reason behind it. Chao Qin nodded. That makes sense. He paused for a moment. Since you're a grandmaster and you're already so old, I'll fulfill your last wish. When Du Ying heard this, he did not respond. He just silently waited for the other to continue. Chao Qin thought for a few seconds before he continued. Chong Wei killed Zhu Zhizhou. Then, the 7 masters from the imperial court killed Chong Wei. After that, King Yin Luo and I went to kill the 7 masters. However, they scattered into the villa and summoned the soldiers outside. So, King Yin Luo, and the maids in the villa went through a lot of trouble and killed all of them. Although Du Ying heard the whole story, he did not understand the reason behind it. Therefore, his face was still filled with shock and confusion. Who are you? He is like my father or my teacher. The person who answered this question was King Yin Luo. At this moment, her figure also appeared in the courtyard in front of the door. Her attire was actually exactly the same as Chao Qin's. A simple and elegant long robe wrapped around her enchanting figure. At her waist, there was also a wine jug. What? Du Ying could not believe his ears. He thought that King Yinluo's cultivation was unparalleled in the world. He did not expect to hear such words from King Yinluo's mouth today. Then, do you understand the reason for your death now? Chao Qin asked. Du Ying failed to answer Chao Xian's question because he only had time to say one word before his head was separated from his neck and landed in Hades' hands. It was a slender hand that was as white as jade, and it was also a deadly hand. This hand was perhaps more deadly than any weapon in this world. 2 seconds later, Chao Qin suddenly turned around and said to the corner of the courtyard, Ladies, you have been watching for a long time. Why don't you come out and talk to me? Originally, there was nothing there. However, as soon as Chao Xian finished speaking, the light barrier suddenly disappeared, revealing Hong Ying's group of 4. Since the two of you have found out, I might as well be frank with you. This time, Su Huaishang did not ask the Bloody Rose to do the talking. Instead, she asked directly, First of all, are you going to kill us as well? That will depend on your attitudes. King Yin Luo said as he raised his hand to point at the corpses on the ground. Look, my maids are all dead. I wonder if the 4 of you are interested in serving me. If a negative answer means death, then I am afraid we cannot refuse. Su Huaishang replied. Ha! Why do you have to show such a displeased expression? King Yin smiled. That smile was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. You should be happy. In fact, you are very lucky. She waved her sleeves and said, in the past few years, my maidservants did not have to worry about food and clothing, but they did not live a good life. But from now on, it will be different. From today onwards, I will be the supreme master of the martial arts world. After you leave the valley with me, you will enjoy endless glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. Just as she finished speaking, before Su Huaishang could respond, suddenly, Marshal, Lin, Ji, Zun. A voice that was extremely despicable and resounded through the clouds tore through the air. The voice repeated these 4 words word by word. There was obvious doubt and mockery in his tone. Without a doubt, there was only one person in the entire scenario who had the ability to cheat the pocket watch and the interest to do something like that. Humph, this is going to be interesting. Chao Xian closed his eyes and chuckled. The next second, Feng Bujue's figure appeared on top of the manor's tall wall, even though the door was just a few meters away and it was still open. I am here. Who dares to call themselves the ruler of the martial arts world? After he appeared, another line of mockery came out of his mouth. It was as if he was looking down on everyone. By then, Yuan Shi, Underworld Frontline, and the rest of the martial artists had already passed through the village and arrived at the manor's gate. Hearing Brother Ju's words, Leader Yuan's expression turned awkward. Technically speaking, as the leader of the martial arts world, Yuan Shi should be the one who had the right to say something like that. But how could he say something like that? However, he couldn't say that his brother Ju was spouting nonsense. After all, this kid was on his side, and his martial arts were immeasurable. It would be unwise to get into a conflict with him at a time like this. Therefore, Yuan Shi pretended that he didn't hear anything and quickly changed the topic. Hades, stop dreaming. He yelled, today heroes from all over the world are gathered here. We will not allow you to hand over the art of immortality to... When the words Imperial Court reached his mouth, he happened to see the corpses of the soldiers in front of him. This caused him to swallow the second half of his words back down. Go on, why did you stop? The King of Hell looked at him, and the leaders of the various sects behind him, hatred flashing in his eyes. You want to accuse me of colluding with the Imperial Court, and then make me give you the art of immortality? Humph! Yuan Shi waved his sleeves and scoffed. Even if you didn't collude with the Imperial Court, it is a fact that you have been harboring villains in the martial arts world all these years. Scum like you, shut up. At that moment, Hades roared and cut Yuan Shi off. Instantly, a wave of true energy spread out with murderous intent and sound waves. The 4 members of Red Cherry Blossom were unlucky. Since they were closer, they were mysteriously hit by the sound wave attack and lost 20% of their life points. The 4 members of Underworld Frontline were further away, but they were not spared from the AoE attack. All of them lost 15% of their life points. Of course, compared to the martial artists, the players were considered lucky. Because their power system was not built on the basis of internal energy, this attack did not deal the full damage to them. What they suffered was the damage from the sound wave. In reality, the damage that was built on the basis of internal energy resonance was the most fatal. After the roar, other than the 8 players, Chao Xian and Yuan Shi, everyone else present coughed up blood from Hades' roar. They collapsed to the ground with shock on their faces. These people were either famous martial artists who had been famous for a long time or the leaders of famous martial arts schools. There were also young and promising martial arts prodigies. However, among these people, none of them were able to withstand this attack. Even though no one died on the spot, the internal injuries caused by this attack made it so that they could not stand up. This roar appeared simple and crude, but it was actually imbued with incredibly profound knowledge about martial arts. Setting aside the players, if the martial artists in this world wanted to defend against this move, they had to do 2 things. First, they had to have more than 20 years' worth of chi cultivation methods that were at the normal standard of martial arts. Second, They had to sense and determine the secret behind the move at the instant the other party executed it, and they had to immediately use their chi to create a barrier in their body to cover their main organs. Only by doing these two things would they be able to defend against this attack. Or else, Hades looked at the martial artists who started to meditate after they fell to the ground, and he chuckled coldly. What kind of heroes are you? Do you really think you can be called heroes? As she spoke, she shifted her gaze to Yuan Qi. You, on the other hand, as a chess piece. You're quite something. Yes, about that. I'm quite surprised as well, Chao Qin added. What are you talking about? Who is the chess piece? Yuan Qi's forehead was already dripping with cold sweat. The martial arts cultivation demonstrated by Yama's attack just now had already made him feel despair. If it weren't for the 4 broken sword Chahitsa cultivators standing beside him, he would most likely have surrendered. You don't understand, right? Chao Qin smiled at him and said 5 words. Then, he suddenly changed his voice to a hoarse state. Then if I say it like this, will you understand? You. In an instant, Yuan Qi's spirit was pushed to the brink of collapse. This was because he recognized that voice. It was a voice that he would never forget. You are. Yuan Qi's body and voice were trembling uncontrollably. Yes, I'm that blind fortune teller. Chao Qin put his hands behind his back and looked at Yuan Qi calmly. And you are a chess piece that I buried in the Jianghu more than 20 years ago. No, that's impossible, Yuan Qi said in shock. You and I only met by chance. If I didn't come to you for fortune-telling, you wouldn't have discovered that I have the Star of Destiny mysterious skill. Yes, we did meet by chance, Chao Qin replied. But you have to understand, whether we met by chance or not, the result would have been the same. He paused for half a second. Aside from Destiny Star mysterious skill, I know at least 12 other ultimate techniques that can allow you to dominate the martial arts world if you obtain one of them. Among them, there are 10 that I can teach to others at any time. In other words, as long as I want to, I can easily support a martial arts alliance leader. What I need is a person who knows how to cherish opportunities and 10 years of time. Hearing this, Yuan Qi's psychological barrier completely collapsed. He realized that the cultivation and calculation of this person in front of him were beyond the reach of ordinary people. He did not need to try to know that no matter what he did, it would be futile in front of this person. Eunuch Chao, what are you doing? Can you explain it to us? At this moment, Feng Bujue spoke again. His tone did not change at all. Master Feng, speaking of which, this matter is related to Broken Sword Chahitsu as well, Chao Qin replied. Oh. Feng Bujue's reaction was unbelievably fast. Could it be related to the sword duel in Changlin? Yes, Chao Qin replied. Looks like Master Feng still remembers me. That's good. He raised his hand and gestured at King Yanluo. Allow me to formally introduce everyone. This King Yanluo is the orphan of Blue Sky, Sword Lin Chong. Lin Yan. Oh. With just this one sentence, Feng Bujue deduced a lot of things. And Chao Qin glanced at Lin Yan. Am her godfather. Just as he finished his introduction, Lin Yan took light steps and turned to face Feng Bujue. She raised her head and said, Master Feng, Lin Yan, I've heard a lot about you. The King of Hell's words shocked everyone. From Yuan Qi to the members of Red Cherry Blossom, to the martial artists, to the audience, they all looked at Feng Bujue as if they were looking at a god. For 40 years, I've been dreaming of meeting you. Then, a strange smile appeared on Lin Yan's face. That smile was tinged with excitement, cruelty, and an indescribable emotion. You can't imagine how many times I've killed you in my dreams. It's because of that hatred for you that I've become who I am today. Then, she untied the wine pot from her waist. She leaned forward, lifted the pot, stretched her neck, opened her red lips, and drank heartily. She was so engrossed in drinking that even though the wine flowed out of her mouth, down her chin, down her neck, and into her heaving chest, she did not care. In a lonely valley, in the waning autumn, under the fog, in front of the flowers, the beautiful woman drank the entire pot of wine. Then, she twisted her waist and straightened her body. She stared at Feng Bujue with a pair of seductive eyes. Today, I'm finally going to get what I want. She threw the wine pot in her hand away, opened her palms, and released her vital energy. I'll kill you and avenge my father. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.